No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. Today, I have arranged a conversation, probably like the best shot that I could have at getting canceled if I had to really guess. We got Richard Spencer in the building. I got my boy Destiny. I wouldn't call this a proper debate or anything, but we're going to just, have a conversation and sort of see where it goes. Richard, thank you for coming all the way from Montana, I believe.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
No doubt. Okay, so I guess I'll just throw out my train of thought from the beginning is that Richard Spencer seems like he's gone through quite a bit of a political transformation, or at least there's been some recalibration of ideas since like 2016 when people were really inundated with your content or your message. What's that been like for you? Since I'm sure that there's a lot of people I had conversations about coming towards this interview where I'm like, he's really not, or at least he doesn't claim to be the version of him that a lot of people kind of remember from a while back.
Yeah, sometimes you need to shatter yourself and pick up the pieces and see how they fit. A lot of it has been organic and intellectual. A lot of it has been just facing down a lot of battles that I don't think I could win. There was this alt-right energy in 2016 and 2017, and we're going to take on the world. We're going to go save the monuments, and Trump is going to be amazing, and all of this kind of stuff. And there certainly there's a tremendous amount of pushback. There's a tremendous amount of violence that can be created by that, and I don't want to be a part of that. I think it's a game you can't really win, and so you shouldn't play. I've also gone through some intellectual development. I think, some things we can get into, but just to, put little placeholders on them. A critique of populism, I would say, in general. I think populism is going to lead to toxic QAnon cults and J6 almost invariably. I think that's what populism is. And I've also rethought a lot of things geopolitically, particularly with the Ukraine situation. And I generally feel like liberals are a kind of hegemonic entity, and they are the ones who can successfully govern. And you have to kind of confront that. You can't just say no to everything or yell at everyone, be a MTG or something like that. You have to look at what is actually possible in the world. And I think Democrats are much more successful in, again, sustaining and governing the society. So a lot of it's kind of been, in some ways, a kind of Hobbesian bargain and lots of other things. But so a lot of it's been organic. A lot of it has been, facing down battles that aren't winnable and not really ones I want to take part in. And I don't know. You kind of get older. You have different opinions.
Looking back at that former version of yourself, though, are you able to kind of take a different perspective on the younger version of yourself that was somewhat consumed with your white identity and really wanted to embrace these culture wars in a way that it seems like you've kind of stepped back from a
Yeah,
bit?
Also, real quick, just on that too. How old are you now, and then how old were you? Yeah, just so I have
I'm 44
Okay,
now,
okay,
and
gotcha.
I'm 39. So I can't
Gotcha.
claim that I was like 16 when I did all the bad stuff. Or anything. I wish I could. But yeah. Uh, so repeat the question again? Sorry, I got a little
I
bit
guess just looking back at
looking
that
back.
former
Yeah.
version of yourself, how do you feel like you got there? And to a lot of people, there's a simplification of anybody who has the sort of beliefs that you might have, where it's like hatred. You're
Right.
filled with hatred, and even reading through like the worst stuff written about you, it can be kind of hard to find the stuff that really seems like specifically hateful. But clearly, it was something.
Well, yeah. I mean, I when I first got into all of this stuff, I dropped out of Duke history department doctoral program in 2007, and I worked for this magazine called The American Conservative, which still exists and is a kind of paleo-conservative, anti-war kind of magazine and so on. But I always wanted something different. I was always attracted to edgier ideas. I mean, I've been a Nietzschean really since I was 20 years old and first picked up that book. So I wasn't ever a paleo conservative. But it was a lot of these kind of webzines. We do, 2,000 word think pieces on things. And I, use terms like the alt-right and this kind of big tent idea of people going against the system. And there was just this moment with Trump where there was the potential to, in a way, kind of become a meme, I guess, is the best way. I mean, I leaned into it. And a lot of it I look back at and I cringe a bit. A lot of it I look back at, I think there were some good things. A lot of it I look back at and I think there are some really awful things. You talk about the hate, kind of, look, race is it's everywhere. It's talked about endlessly by the mainstream media, by the Atlantic Monthly, by live streamers. It's obviously extremely important. And we do need to have a conversation about it. But that stereotype of it's all about resentment and hatred, and that can lead to violence, that stereotype isn't entirely untrue. I mean, if you look at someone like the Buffalo shooter or something like that, he was radicalized on 4chan during the pandemic, and he cut and pasted a bunch of memes, and it became this, basketball game of, I'm going to kill 10, and so the whites are up. Just horrible stuff.
And meanwhile,
The fact
people are
is,
probably
it can lead to that.
and people are when that kind of stuff comes out in the media, especially then, people are assuming like, oh, Richard should be happy about this. Right?
Exactly. And I don't want that. That makes me sick to think about it. And I also, but and it is unfair, obviously, but and it's not legally binding or anything. But at the same time, you do need to ask yourself, are you getting involved in something that actually does lead to someone doing something like this? And it's not most people, it's less than 1%. But is that 1% of the population of your readers going to hear what you're saying and think, oh, yes, I should go kill non-whites, so we'll be up by 10 this game or some you have to recognize that. And so I've also taken a bit of a view that in some ways, like there needs to be layers to how you think about things. And in terms of everyday politics, I mean, this is what Destiny was saying when I first met him. It's like, I don't know if you're now a liberal cuck or whatever, a fascist or whatever. There's an outer layer of things that you have to address in the real world. Like, should we ban abortion? Should we have some more reasonable gun legislation? What should we do in Ukraine? These are just kind of immediate things. And you can have some opinions on them that are, in a way, short-term, immediate stuff. I think it's more important because I still do want to change the world. I still do feel like civilization is degenerating, that we're headed to a very bad place. But that kind of work needs to take place at a different level. It's not going to take place on the level of, black crime, Hispanic immigrants or whatever. It's going to take place on a much deeper and much more spiritual level. And so I feel like my calling for my life is to focus there. And I have lots of opinions on contemporary stuff, and I probably am just pretty much of a centrist liberal when it comes to a lot of those things. But in terms of the deeper core of what I'm about, spiritual core, I do want to be radical as hell. And I do want to, in a way, shock people and try to get the world moving in a different direction. But it's kind of a very different tact. And I think it's kind of ironically more pragmatic to deal with spiritual matters like that.
Okay. Destiny, like what assumptions do you have about Richard going into this? Do you have like a generally negative or positive opinion of him? And how do you feel about hearing about this transition that he's kind of been through?
I mean, obviously my impression is overwhelmingly negative. I feel like people call you like the founder of the alt-right. And then I've seen...
Because you had the URL, right?
Yeah,
I don't know about but I mean, like,
all that
remember
stuff.
the old interviews? I think of the black guy in the UK asking you. It was like the BBC thing. It's like,
Yeah,
do I blind?
yeah, sure.
So like, I saw that video footage. But I mean, I guess my strength as a political commentator, people that engage with people, is like I'm always willing to meet people where they are. I know that a lot of people grow and change. There's stuff that I've said 4 or 5 years ago that I cringe at. now. It's a product of where you're at in your personal development. It could be a product of where you're at in your professional development, in the world around you, and it can be a product of what's happening in the world around you. You know, we joked yesterday a lot on the show that like COVID did something to a lot of people's
Oh yeah.
minds. That 2 year period, like, fucking exaggerated so many different people's beliefs and opinions about so many different things. And I try not to. Yeah, I try not to define myself as a reaction to the things that happen around me, but realistically, we do react, right? And people are reacting constantly to the things that exist around me. And I try to point that out to other people that um, people can often be irrational, but people are never random, ever. People mistake somebody's irrational feelings as randomness or hatred or whatever. And it's like, no, if somebody feels a particular way about a race of people, a religion of people, or whatever, it's probably something that pushed them in that direction, you know? And yeah, I mean, as long as people continue to grow and reflect and change their thoughts going forward, yeah, I think that's always a good thing. So I don't think Richard just said anything right now that I would offhandedly disagree with, but all of it so far has been like pretty meta level. So it depends on, I guess, where you've gone on an applied level with a lot of what you're saying. Like some people say like, oh, like I think it's important they have like a well-functioning and fair criminal justice system. And on a meta level, that's fine. But then on an applied level, they may be like, I think anybody that deals drugs should be having the death sentence because it's hurting our children. And it's like, okay, well, now we have problems. But yeah, it just depends on where we go on the applied level with things.
How are you applying these things?
Well, I mean, you can see how I apply these things if you know take a look at my Twitter account or something like that. I mean, I guess my reaction. I mean, and I would apply them in liberal ways. I mean, again, Joe Biden has been the best president of my lifetime, no question. The
Probably a
rem-
lot of people are going to be deeply shocked to hear you say that, even though I think you've made that pretty clear on social media and stuff. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, look, I've been a Biden supporter longer than a Trump supporter, but I don't think I can ever escape my old shadow. But in terms of Afghanistan, that obviously needed to be done. In terms of something like the CHIP Act, I mean, I met this kid the other day. It was actually New Year's Eve, and he was this young kid with a technology degree, and he was like doing all this amazing stuff. I saw like optimism among people. They're doing, semiconductor work in Montana of all places. So I think there's just a lot of great things. I think he's right on the abortion question. I think he's right on gun control. I mean, that is how I apply them in the sense of a central liberal attitude. I mean that's the proper way to apply it. I think a lot of times, it's like the idea of like what's radical, and I've always been fascinated with this term. I mean, I named my journal Radix. It's about radical, getting to the heart of things. Radix is the root of the word root. Um, and I think a lot of right wing commentators, and includes me, is you kind of want to say something shocking that's immediately shocking. Like, if we catch you dealing drugs, we're gonna torture you in front of the public, and all girls who go on OnlyFans should be thrown into a kitchen bare feet, forced to make me sandwiches.
This is a whole genre these days.
It's the kind of Fuentes approach. Like, let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
And
Although he's probably not even close to the worst of them at this point. He
No.
seems kind of like restrained in comparison to a lot of people now.
Well, he's getting a little bit older.
Yeah.
Yeah. And look, a lot of this kind of thing is fun on some level. It's meant to shock, and I think there's this weird game where it's almost done for the liberals. Like they'll say this kind of shocking thing, knowing that like Media Matters is going to clip it, and then they could go all to their fans and be like, "Oh, I'm the big badass here." Yeah. That's all fine and good, but it is very juvenile. And I think what our society is missing is an overarching vision. And as Destiny was saying about reacting, it's natural that we react to things, and it's necessary. But our society doesn't have some kind of all-encompassing vision where we can define ourselves as a civilization and as the human race. And I've never been a fan of Kanye West or Ye in terms of his music, and I don't even know what I think about him exactly as a person. But I will grant him this. And I'll grant Nick Fuentes this. Nick Fuentes has hated me for years and whatever. We've kind of reached an understanding. But I will give both of those people this. That notion of defining the human race and Americans in particular as a Christian movement that is about love of all people. This is who we are. Our book is our code. I don't agree with this. I mean, I'm a Nietzschean, dyed in the wool Nietzschean, so on. But I respect the fact that he's putting that forward because I do think that that's what we lack. Joe Biden can offer something, some fantasy of like a middle class America, manufacturing, all that kind of fun stuff. We like each other, we're proud. That's all great, but it's fundamentally lacking, and I think particularly for young people and in the 21st century, it just feels hollow.
Mm.
I mean, I drove by tent cities, on my way out here. The OnlyFans thing, the notion of 22-year-old girls, their entire income is coming from selling their tits and ass to random men. I mean, there's just something hollow and depressing about this shit, you know?
Yeah, as an OnlyFans creator, I can confirm that.
Right.
There's a lot of times where you're like, "What the fuck is this?"
Right. No.
I feel like
I get it. I'm not really even judging.
Yeah.
I would say this to your face. I'd say this to other people's face with sympathy. But like we've got to get to a point where there's an overarching vision that's going to bring our society to a higher level because everyone wants it. Any kind of poll you hear, are we on the right track or the wrong track? Wrong track. Do you think your children are going to have a better future than you do? Worse. It's just so consistent, this kind of anxiety and depression, kind of death of God that we're experiencing, that there has to be something new put in its place. And I do feel like that's my calling. If I can contribute to that, I've really done something. If I go on some media interview and be like, whites are the best, who cares? That stuff's ephemeral and meaningless.
I feel like one of the contradictions that have existed in America for a long time is we seem to have this idea that, and I hear this a lot when people hearken to the past. I don't know if there ever was a unified America where we all had this overarching concept or idea that we all pushed for. We felt like we were on the same team. Like I'm always quick to point out that like I feel like we're divided more today than we ever have been in our history. And then people will point out, well, we had a civil war, which is very true. We did have a civil war, a pretty big one and a pretty violent one. I think that what is inherent to American ideology is that we have so many different and disconnected groups all living in the same country, and somehow, for a long time, we have made it work better than any other country in, I think, human history, in terms of global hegemony, in terms of economic power, in terms of cultural creation and exportation. Somehow we've got all these different types of people, sometimes with wildly conflicting beliefs, and we've threaded together this idea, both legally and kind of like governmentally, conceptually. We've threaded together this idea of liberal democracy, where we've had all sorts of different people that have managed to live and work under one roof successfully. I think that I hate going back to this because it's so boring. I think there are a lot of really sexy and exciting answers to give for what's going on in the country today. It might be our spiritual decay and our abandonment of Christ. It might be things like the OnlyFans girls and the pornography. It might be things like white supremacy and white colonialism. It might be things like the patriarchy, and these are like really fun and cool ideas because it gives you like a very clear enemy to fight against. And when you've got an enemy to fight against, you can rally people on your side. You can give speeches. You can raise money. You can go to war. You can protest and riot, and you feel like you've got this righteous fire in your belly because you're fighting against something that's clearly evil and is clearly destroying your lives. And I feel like what's actually happening is it's a more boring answer. But I think that the amount of information that's available to us today on the internet, I don't believe that our brains are like fundamentally capable of existing in that environment, parsing information responsibly, and getting an idea of what's actually going on. And instead, what's happening is we're being overwhelmed with information, and then our brains, with all of their flaws and biases, are picking and choosing the worst of all worlds to put together this horrible view of the United States and of the world sometimes. I feel this a lot with, I briefly touched on this yesterday, but on February 3rd, I think, there was a pretty big train derailment, a lot of chemicals that were spilled in East Palestine. On that night and in the following days, every single mainstream media company reported on this. MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, you can go to Internet Archive and you can look at their top stories and all of them have it on there. Every single mainstream media. But nobody cared, because why would we? Train derailments happen a lot, chemicals spill a lot, do we really care? Not really. And then 2 weeks later, I think I saw 2 videos go viral. One was a guy literally screaming at the clouds saying, "Look at that, this is fucking bullshit, they're burning chemicals." And then another one was, I think, a guy in like a van who said like, "My voice sounds like Mickey Mouse now." And after those two things went viral on social media, now everybody's like, oh my God, why did the media cover this up? Why was nobody covering this? What's going on? Nobody was reporting on it. And it's like, it was reported on. You just didn't give a fuck until it went viral in your fucking TikTok feed. You didn't care until you saw it on Twitter. And now all of a sudden, now you're like, well, why didn't anybody make a big deal? It's like, they did. They posted it, but nobody cared.
I agree with you in terms of the mechanics of what you've just described, but I would look at the psychology of why that happened. And the reason why it happened is that we're almost expecting, or maybe even desiring, a kind of Titanic-like event, because we know that something is rotten in the state of Denmark, and we're looking for something that can express that. This big derailment, poisoning the water supply, killing animals, all et cetera. We're looking for it. We almost want it because that's an expression about how we really feel about the country.
Yeah, but is it that, or is it just like a natural human tendency to be drawn towards like dramatic and negative events? I'm sure you've played this one, not to poke at your past or whatever, but I'll do it. I play this all the time.
Sure.
Right? If you ask people involved in BLM, I'm curious, how many unarmed black men do you think are killed every year by the police?
Oh, man.
Billions.
Yeah, millions, billions.
Oh, I'm just
perhaps.
kidding.
I
Like, if
don't
you had
know.
to take a guess, it's unfair. I'm putting you on
a
the spot, but, like,
relatively
yeah,
small
because
number, right?
Yeah.
it's like people might say like a relatively small number and guess like maybe like 500. It's like 12.
Right.
It's a very small number. But like, think about it this way.
But it's an expression of what they feel. I think it might not very well be rational, and you can shove statistics down their throat, but it's an expression of how they feel, and it might even be a certain kind of fantasy element to it as well, in the sense that they do feel out of place and oppressed and not making it or something. It also expresses a certain kind of fantasy of like to make a conflict that is invisible in a way visible.
Yeah,
And
that's what I was saying before. It feels good to have the patriarchy to fight against, or
Right.
to have cops to fight against, because you get this, because there is a lot of frustration in general in life. I think that's probably part of life. And through a combination of removing all tenacity from people, because we've poisoned children's minds into thinking that any type of adversity is absolutely fucking negative and you should remove all of it from your life, in terms of removing a lot of the major problems from people's lives, right? Like, realistically, if you're a woman, no one is saying that like you can't work that job because you're a woman. So you kind of have to look for sexism in more subtle and nuanced ways, which is good. You should look for it. But when you start to lose a lot of these bigger problems, it kind of feels like, I don't want to say you have to invent problems, but you remember what Dick said yesterday on the show when we were talking about like, it feels like some people are like, and I get this feeling sometimes, I get a lot of hate for this, but like, you're middle class, you're white, parents are decent wealthy, you go to a decent school, and then you get online and it's like, I have nothing to complain about. Well, now I'm going to be non-binary, and now I'm going to have the most depression ever. And it's like, is that really like what you need to like have something to complain about? Like, and that's what it feels like a lot of times. That people sometimes you remove so many of the big problems that people are like, I need something to fucking complain and bitch and be a victim about. But I feel like that's like the human condition. I remember kids doing it in high school. I went to a prep school, and I'll go to these kids' houses. It's like, my fucking family just got kicked out of our third fucking house. I go to this girl's house who's like, one parent is like a dentist and the other is like partnered at a law firm with a mansion, and she's talking about, yeah, I cut myself every night because I'm so depressed. And in my mind, I'm thinking, how the fuck can you be depressed? You're rich, you have everything in life. But in their mind, they're like, well, humans, I think, tend to look for something.
None of that is meaningful. Like the big screen TV is meaningless. They don't actually want it. What they want is meaning and direction in their lives. It's not just about not having something to complain about. Like, we're not being invaded by Russia right now.
Mm-hmm.
If we're invaded by Russia, even the blue-haired feminist would like strap on a gun and be ass kicking.
Look at 9/11, bro.
Yeah.
98% of the country was ready to go to war with whatever fucking country in the world you threw a dart at, bro. If you tell me Nigerians were the ones that fucking flew, planes to the World Trade Centers, I think 98% of America, let's go to war with them right now. Yeah,
I was actually in New York City in 9/11. Believe it or not, I experienced this with this is 23 years ago. As liberal types who I would talk to, and I would almost kind of gently talk to them because I was afraid that they were gonna tell me about like the history of the Crusades and racism against Arabs, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we need to go to war right now."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
So, but
Bush was on Jesus. Like, it's funny because we make fun of like Muslims and shit, and imams saying, holy war and jihad and all this shit. And I want to say Bush was on camera saying like, I prayed and God told me that we need to go to war with Iraq. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. But back then we were ready for it.
If that were to happen right now, if we had another 9/11, do you think the country's so polarized that we would never get anywhere close to that like 98% agreement on going to war?
Yes, I think it kind of is over, and I this is a really big subject that I'm glad we're talking about. But I mean, I was very enthused about the new Cold War that has arisen. And that might sound cynical or sadistic or something. It's not. Because it does, when you have the unipolar world, globalism, you don't know who's who and who's what or where we are, who's the enemy. It's murky and kind of weird. Now we're kind of returning to something that we're used to and something that we fought and won previously, a Cold War, a division between a Russian or kind of Soviet-like society. Perhaps China's involved. We'll figure that out. It's kind of here and there at the moment, but it gives people some stability and meaning. You need. You kind of need someone to hate or someone to fear or someone to be your adversary.
Do we?
Because that
Do
yes,
we
you
really?
do.
I hate that.
I
That's
know-
got to be a thing we can
I-
change in human nature. It has to be,
Well,
right?
I at least you're being reasonable about it, and yes, we do, and
I
we
would-
need
when I would-
something that's bonding as well. Like, what is the origin of religion? Is it you've come up with some rational, device to prove that God exists? No, that's not
It's a
the
way to
origin.
explain stuff that's already going on in the world, essentially, I think. right?
No, it's a way of congealing masses of people without force. You can't you can only point a gun at someone and force someone to fight a battle for so long. What you really need to have is for them to want to fight the battle, for them to want you to be an authority, to want to die, in fact, in order to accomplish something bigger than yourself.
I feel there
That's
has
the
to
origin
be.
of religion, and that's why we need it.
Yeah,
And
there has to be a way to do it without enemies. I feel like it's funny because you bring this up, but I actually use this exact argument when I would fight against like race realist and stuff in the past. That people would say things like, "We need to get rid of all black and brown people. It needs to be only white people." It's like, okay, well, if we run this argument to its maximum, right? I don't like. First of all, if you had any group of white people that got rid of everybody else, don't you think at that point they're going to start looking at like, well, what percentage white are you, right? Because like if you go to Europe, it's not just white and black people, especially if you go to some like, especially if you're in Scandinavia, right? The Europeans have fucking ethnic eyes like I've never seen before. We're like, oh, that dude over there, he's like 37.5% Russian. I can tell because of his hairline. I'm like, the fuck? How do you? He's just a white guy to me. It all looks the same shit to me. But like, you start to see the divisions more and more. And if you've got people that have made justifications for getting rid of people based on color of their skin, then why not like the Fuenteses next, right? Who are 25% Hispanic,
Right.
or why not people with like
Interesting.
brown eyes or brown hair? Like, where would that like would the division ever truly stop? Because Jesus, like, go to play like former like Yugoslavia. Like, you've got like so many similar types of people that are all trying to fucking kill each other like crazy. And it's like,
Well-
what are you guys
Well,
doing?
I agree, but you don't descend into that infinite regress because you're able to define an enemy and define an us.
Yeah, I
And-
know. I understand that it feels
Yeah.
very 1984ish because in that book, right, there has to be a constant enemy that you're waging war against because it gives you a forward direction. But can people grow out of that?
No.
They have to be able
do
to.
we want to? Do we want
Yes,
to? Because
we
it's,
do.
No, you don't. Because it's like resistance and struggle. You understand who you are. I mean, I was not a great athlete at all, so I'm not bragging about the not so glorious days of my athletics. But like, I learned something about myself by playing on a football team and losing, and sometimes winning, and struggling against someone. And I wouldn't know who I was if I didn't do that. You need a resistance force and an opposition in order for some kind of synthesis to develop of a real identity.
So I agree 1,000,000%. I'm having an interesting. So I've been streaming for 12 years.
Mhm.
I've been on the internet for a long time, and I've identified like trends with my content. And we go through big upswings where we've got a lot of viewership, a lot of crazy stuff, and then we go through downswings where it's a little bit more boring. And a conversation that my communities have right now that I figured out is that like my content is at its best when I have opposition.
Right.
Like, I can cover a story, I can do political research, and that's okay. But when there are people opposing me to fight against, it becomes a million times more interesting. Like, I think I carried like 13,000 viewers doing like a 6-day research stream on like the new Pearl Harbor. It was like a 5-hour 9/11 documentary. And it's because people were really hyped up for me to debate Nick Fuentes and Sneeko after watching it. And I noticed that like having that oppositional figure drives so much of my political content. But it's hard to hold those oppositional figures because the relationships are very volatile. Because eventually somebody's feelings get hurt, somebody's ego gets bruised, and they'll be like, fuck you, I'm never talking to you again.
Sure.
But one thing that I'm able to do, and I've met some people that can do this, Dick yesterday was a good example, is I love somebody that like we can fight, like, fuck you, I hate you, this is horrible, fuck, your ideas are shit, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, you're like, okay. And then we're done. We're done arguing. It's cool. We disagree. But like, we're okay at the end of the day. We don't actually fucking hate each other.
That's us, Destiny.
Yeah, well, maybe I haven't gotten there yet, but I wish that like more people were able to do that. And I noticed that like the drawing of the battle lines for the us versus them, like it's so crazy how my black history is horrible. So obviously I only know Martin Luther King and fucking Malcolm X because that's what every white person knows for the only two black people in all of fucking U.S. history. But it's so interesting how we went from all of the MLK shit, like, oh yeah, like we all need to come together and be cool people, whatever, to like, actually, we need to bring back segregation and have black only businesses with black customers and fuck white people. And it's like, what the fuck? How the fuck did we circle all the way back here where like there are like these people that are talking about like the critical race theory and like the very heavy like college anti-whiteness like lectures and shit that are now having like black only sessions where they're talking about like anti-blackness and shit, and it starts to feel like really segregated and weird. Like,
when
what
I
the
was
fuck
reading
happened?
through the Southern Poverty Law Center thing about Richard last night, which I can kind of assume probably hasn't been updated since like approximately 2016 because they left out some newer stuff, but I'm reading it and it's like almost every quote that I'm seeing from you talking about your white identity or whatever is something that sounds eerily familiar to something I've heard black people say in relatively mainstream circles in the last couple of years. So I don't know if maybe those statements seemed a little bit different in 2016, but viewed from today's light, it really, a large percentage of them didn't really seem all that shocking to me.
Well, I mean, that's true. I mean, look, there is a double standard in the sense of you can listen with sympathy to a black person talking about identity and maybe even having some hatred of things like that. You can listen to that sympathetically, but a white person does it and there's just no sympathy. You could talk about guns, you can talk about Christianity, you can talk about all these other things, but an actual white identity is something that we're just not allowed to talk about. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, maybe it's a good thing in a way, in the sense that whites do want to the best aspect of being white in a way is to try to transcend your mere material position and to do something that's bigger, to do something that would almost bring people in. I think that's a very strong power in European history. So, I mean, on some level, this double standard is kind of a good thing. I mean,
and I will say too, also like on that back, because I can't let you say all that and not say anything because my fan base is gonna hate me. But truly, like the issue that I have is that like there is a difference between like white pride and black pride. Like if we're honest, the histories between these two things are different, and generally the sentiments behind them are different. Right?
What is
like,
the difference?
I think the difference is that generally white people are pretty okay in the United States on the qualification of being white. Now, there are poor white people, but their lives aren't fucked because they're white, they're fucked because they're poor. Or there might be white people that are addicted to drugs, but their lives aren't fucked because they're white, they're fucked because they're hooked to opiates. Whereas for black people, African Americans specifically, descendants of slaves, a lot of their lives today are still a little bit fucked, not because their parents were poor or their grandparents were poor, but because there were racial policies in the United States from 64 and earlier that actually like racially impacted people. So I'm very empathetic.
So you only get to have pride if you struggle. I mean, like
I'm not saying you can only.
That
Here's
what you're saying.
Well, no. Hold on, no, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that like I can understand people treating the things a bit differently.
Sure.
But the problem is that people take it a little bit too far, and instead of saying like, well, hold on, I think that there needs to be a special, unique place for black people to talk about their place in the U.S. and the history in the U.S. That evolved into fuck white people. They can't talk about anything related to whiteness, and now we're only going to talk about black issues. And if you even dare challenge that, you're racist. Like that evolution is very toxic, and I think that change is what is like destroyed so many of the conversations. Thinking back like to the phrase like it's okay to be white, like the response to that should have just, or like white lives matter, the response to that should have just been like, yeah, they do, but like that's not what we're talking about right now, and like that's it, instead of like, no, you can't say that, that's hateful. It's like, why fight against that? Like it's so stupid.
Right. I didn't quite follow you there at the end. I mean, I don't. I mean, there is also a kind of double standard of when someone has Irish pride or something like that. It's
Mm.
like, oh, that's so cool and beautiful and poetic and things like that. Someone says they have German pride and they people have a little bit of a different opinion, or Russian pride, because it's bigger and stronger and more powerful and can actually affect the world, unlike I don't know, Irish Catholic nationalism or something like that. But you can't just say, okay, it's good if it's weak and it's bad if it's strong. I mean, it's a natural human tendency to want to be a part of a bigger tribe, something bigger than yourself, civilization even. And so it can't just be justified if people are not politically powerful.
Yeah, I mean it's going to depend on the type of movement you're in and like where you're coming from. Like because realistically, like when somebody says white pride, I don't really know like white people as a group historically. I don't like it's hard to know what that means. Like if you want to talk about like German people, Russian people, Irish people, like there are achievements and things that you can give to specific nationalities, specific ethnicities, things in the past. But it feels like when people talk about like white as an overarching group, at least in my mind, the only thing I think of is slavery. Because I'm like, well, what did
Right.
white people do versus like
Or you
black
think
people?
you think it's almost too generic and kind of
Yeah, that's the
vague. Like,
issue.
what
And then
does
when
it, what does
somebody
it
appeals to
what does it
something,
mean? You go to Target as opposed to the dollar store. You're white or
Mhm.
something.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Whereas I think and then
I
there's a slight difference too, because when you talk about like African American culture, there was a unifying culture between descendants of slaves because a lot of them can't even point back to the countries they're from. And so their culture basically starts at my great 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 granddaddy was a slave and that's all I have. And here's the culture that I was thrust into, that was thrust upon me. And then this is what we created out of that. And so I'm more sympathetic to, I understand why some people are like, I have African American pride, but it feels a little bit different. It's like, I have white pride. It's like, okay, well, you can go to Ellis Island, you can see like exactly where your family came from. Like your pride is going to be a little bit more ethnically precise than that. And when you just say white pride, it feels a little bit strange, you know?
I get what you're saying, and I'm being sympathetic towards it. I have many of the same criticisms. One of the criticisms that I do agree with that you hear from the left is, they'll show some image of some fatso screaming white pride or yelling at someone, and they'll be like, "This is the white supremacist," And then there's also that other kind of question of like, what are you actually standing for? What do you want?
Yeah.
I think that was a major question, the why question about the alt-right and why it failed and is kind of part of the past now,
Mhm.
is because it couldn't answer. There was no like actual spiritual core to what whiteness is.
Which
I
is
think that's
so
very
many
true.
movements have that issue. Remember Occupy
Yeah.
Wall Street? What the
Yes.
fuck did they want? That was a
I
huge forever,
actually,
and it came and it went, and like, what the fuck did you guys want? Or BLM and the riots and the police. Like, what did you guys want? To abolish policing? They tried that as a place, it didn't work. Like, what did you guys want? The alt right, Charlottesville, everything. What do you guys want? And it's like
exactly.
more Christianity, Catholicism, not that. What more? Like what? Like yeah, there's an
I
issue with a lot
I
of
agree.
misdirected anger today, where it's like channel it on something and figure out a policy or something to rally by. Fucking give me
Well,
legalize like marijuana or something, but find something that you want to champion.
well,
Otherwise,
that's
it's
because America isn't offering that anymore. So when you think about, okay, I mean, I'll do two things real quick. So just be a little patient. So there is a white identity to the United States that is, I would say, overwhelmingly Protestant and overwhelmingly Anglo. And there were a lot of nativist battles against bringing in Italians and Central Europeans and so on in the 19th century between about from the Immigration Act of 1924 and let's say up to the 60s. I think and this was also coming after the progressive reforms that did a lot of great things, in my opinion. But anyway, I think there was a pretty coherent white American public. It was perhaps fleeting. It was kind of more Christian than Protestant, more European than Anglo-Saxon, but it was a real thing. But I also think that like grasping onto that, holding on to it is kind of clinging to the past. I think we've moved beyond that period of time. It was a great time in many ways. It was a bad time if you were African American, or not so bad, but bad in many ways
or
if you're an African.
Chinese, or depending on where you were.
I
What you're
get
doing.
it.
Yeah,
I get it.
mhm.
But it was something, and I think that was probably the essence of the "Make America Great Again" notion. It was about again going back to the past, rehearsing something. But I think the main thing is that America is not able to offer any overarching, coherent vision that's attractive, that's irrational, even that's exciting. Dionysian, and thus we're kind of retreating into this like fragmented societies of BLM angst, alt-right angst, Fuentes Ye angst, screw the patriarchy angst. They're probably literally screwing the patriarchy. But that's anyway.
I feel
But because we're not offering anything. When John Winthrop, before he even set foot on this soil, he had an idea of what America was. It was this New Jerusalem concept. It was a highly fundamentalist, puritanical notion, one that I don't resonate with, to be honest. But it was something. He defined it even before he was here. We've had various ways in the Cold War. I mean, I have this article I'm going to publish, but it's about how U2 kind of predicted the Cold War or ended the Cold War in some crazy way. Though we're torn in two, we can be one. They sang that in 1983 before 1989, 91, and everything changed. And so they were imagining some vision that you wanted to come be a part of. And I think for Bono and U2 is actually deeply Christian. This is there has to be something there, or we are going to fragment into things like BLM and the alt-right.
So this is something also that I kind of think in terms of. So earlier I alluded to this idea that I feel like the idea of a unified America was a bit illusory. I feel like we felt that way, or we feel like in the past it was that way. So Adam, when you talk about like hip hop and you talk about like rappers, I feel like one thing that's really important for a lot of these guys that a lot of kind of middle class America, and I feel like people have lost, is where you're from.
Oh yeah, huge.
Yeah, but I think that I feel like in the United States, I feel like we used to be a lot more local, but again, because of the internet, I think something happened to where now the only thing everybody knows. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Everybody knows, like, if you ask like a fucking conservative in Wyoming or Montana or whatever, like, which politician do you hate the most? They're going to talk to you about like people from the House of Representatives in New York.
Yes.
They're going to talk to you about people that have no impact on their lives whatsoever.
Right.
And I think that there's an illusion I think that's created in the past America where everybody's involved in their own communities and their own churches and their own unions and their own local politics scene. And you feel like you're kind of a unified America, even though this community and this community might feel totally fucking different about things, but in their own communities, they've achieved some sort of equilibrium where they feel comfortable and confident. But now, fuck local politics. Everybody's on this national level, and no way can you get 340 million people to all feel the same about fucking anything.
But in a weird way, we all do feel the same. It's kind of both because, like a rancher in Wyoming, because he's on social media to some degree, is going to be like, those BLM riots, they're burning down cities, like Antifa's coming from, and it's like, listen, let me, as someone who was assaulted by Antifa, I can tell you, like, they are not coming to rural Montana, like, just, let you know.
But I mean, on that same thing, though,
we're brought together in this kind of incredible way.
Yeah, but in like but in a horrible way. Because the reality is that like, if you were to poll a ton, there's just something, oh my God, my mind, I changed so many opinions on politics when I realized this, is if you're trying to figure out what Americans feel like, first of all, get rid of the idea of Americans, number one. And number two, stop looking at national polling data, because we don't vote national in anything. We vote for our representatives, we vote for our senators, and then we vote within our states for things. And when you start looking more granularly at American opinion, you start to realize more why things are the way they are. You might think that like, well, 52% of Americans support the legalization of marijuana or prostitution or gun control or whatever. But when you look state by state, you're like, okay, hold on, this breaks down way differently depending on where you're looking at things.
But that's changing.
But we're trying to force.
Is happening.
It might be, but the problem is we're trying to force our national views on everything, where we still have a system, whether we like it or even acknowledge it, that still very much works on the local level. I think BLM and policing is a really good example. We tried to come together as a country and make strong statements on policing, but policing is decided by your mayor. These are your most local elections. Obama's not going to fucking save you from a bad cop. Right. Trump's not going to do shit about an unfair prosecution. But we all are looking and obsessing at that national level, and then nobody looks at their local communities. And now we're like, well, I feel like we don't get along like we ever did before. It's like, I don't know if anybody from New York City in the year 1892 would have gotten along with somebody from, some rural place, some rancher in Texas, but it felt like they did because they never talked to each other. They never had the opportunity to be exposed to each other.
Let me try to bring some of these things together, because you're bringing up some very important topics. So America has never been a coherent nation, and it's never been a nation state at all. It has always been an empire in some degree or another.
Sure.
So there's actually a thinker who's out of favor now, who I think is a genius, Frederick Jackson Turner, with this notion of the frontier.
Mhm.
So in European languages, if you're, let's say, a Prussian and you have the word frontier, that means border. That means you've got to face off against the Russian Empire, France, some naval invasion, all that kind of stuff. In America, frontier means the opposite. It means endless open space, which we had. You can just go out there and make a new world, and if you can survive, you're it.
Mhm.
And we actually went downward in terms of civilization. So in Boston, you're riding trolley cars and reading the Gospels, and you start to go out into the wilderness and you're rowing a canoe and reading the Old Testament. So we've almost like gone backwards as you go out into the frontier. So and you can see this despite progressives who kind of FDR as well kind of nationalized many things, made us more of a European coherent nation. That's not who we are. We do have a kind of outmoded political system on some level.
Mhm.
It's at very least not a political system conducive to a nation state.
Sure.
We'll never be
A
Finland in that
coherent,
sense.
singular identity. Yeah.
Right.
But that's
And
kind of
so-
what I
and-
wonder
and
when we
so
talk about
wanting
like.
that, but
Yeah.
and the irony of it is that we are being nationalized. I agree. Like a guy in Maine or a guy in Wyoming who are both kind of right wing types, they both hate AOC and think
Mhm.
she's going to go take their guns or whatever. So it's like we're going through all of these forces, and I think there's also the contradiction between the ability to deal with domestic issues and then America's identity as a global empire. Like since 1944 at the very least, and probably before that, we've set the terms for the world. The world cannot function without us and the dollar. And I'm not just saying this as some wild
Or would
American
function in a very different way.
jingoist.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it would be horrible if this thing went down. All of these Ron Paul types or tankies or liberals saying, like in the American empire or whatever, they don't know what that will actually entail and a lot of horrors that would entail. So America's always been this frontier in this sense of expansion and globalism. It is what we are. And so there's that contradiction between like domestic affairs and our obligations as imperialists. You hear this with Hawley of, we need a party about East Palestine and not a party about the globalist in Ukraine or something. Well, actually, as an
We need
American,
both.
obviously you need both, to some degree. But as an American, you actually do need to think about Ukrainians, and not just out of sympathy, which I definitely have, but out of the fact that you have an imperial obligation to think about them.
Mhm.
And I think we have this, it's like one of the kind of contradictions of populism is, in some ways Trump was an expression of the decline of America, not necessarily through his actions, but through his rhetoric of like, come home, take care of ourselves, let's spend money on ourselves. Americans are dreamers, no more immigration, build a wall.
Mhm.
All of these things are kind of like on
The
some
shriveling
level
of an
retreats.
insect, the dying of like
Yeah.
yeah.
And even Trump, when he was a better version of Trump in the 80s, when he was on Larry King or whatever, he was still kind of like that. This nationalism of kind of bringing things in. It might have something to do with the fact that he came from Manhattan. It's this kind of like pitched battle.
Maybe, but I mean, like, look at his investments. Like, the guy spends money and makes money like all over the world too, right? Like,
No question.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no question. Russia. Yeah.
I think in terms of what you're
but-
talking about, the thing that I guess I'd like to appeal to, I guess circling back to what I said before, is it feels like we're so divided today. But in 1950, like how often was like a Jewish guy from New York debating a guy that lives in like fucking New Mexico?
Right.
It's never happening. So the division might have existed, but we didn't see it because those people weren't brought together. But now we've taken this version of the American experiment. We've got so many different people living in our country, which we've made work, and that's awesome. But now we're like bashing heads on everything. And I guess it feels so fucking lame because it feels like such a libcuck thing to say. But I feel like at the end of the day, what we have to appeal to is America has only worked so far, and it will only continue to work if you can accept that some of the people living in your country are Nazis, and some of the people living in your country fucking hate white people and want them to die. And it sucks, but as long as they're not calling for either side to be killed, you have to accept that these people are all going to live here and the country has to
Yeah,
function
but the
as it does.
non-aggression principle is not enough. Like I agree that that's reasonable and that we could kind of get along and maybe even kind of laugh at each other. I think there's something to be said even for like the friendliness that comes from like telling an anti-Italian joke with your Italian friend. Like you're kind of making fun of them, but in a way you're kind of both being human in a way. So I get that, but it's not enough. There has to be an overarching meaning of what it means to be an American. America is an ideological nation, just like the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was able to coherently do that. They attracted the minds.
But they didn't.
But
That's why they
because
fell
lost
apart,
it.
right? Yeah.
Right, but they lost it.
But I think because
and
part
they
of the
collapsed immediately.
But
when
part
they
of the
lost that
pursuit of that,
legitimacy.
part of the pursuit of that though was like the hardcore Russification of all of the little territories and states that they took over. And I think that's part of why it wasn't like the Soviet Union naturally grew out and expanded as it, expanded its empire and its ideology. A lot of it was literally like, half of you guys died from a famine. We're going to go ahead and ship 2 million Russians down to Ukraine. We're going to go ahead and take over all of your governments in Lithuania, Estonia. We're going to go ahead and do that. And so, of course, over time, like the people there never felt like they truly had to buy into the Soviet Union. They were just kind of like subjugated by the Soviet Union. It's like, okay, well, we're here until the Soviet Union falls apart, and now we're fucking leaving immediately, which I think happened when the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union collapsed.
That's true to a great extent. There was also a kind of nation building thing of creating nations that didn't exist, giving them national poets. There's kind of countervailing forces. And obviously when they were invaded by the National Socialist Army, there was a call in the motherland and all that kind of stuff. Russian nationalism. Russians are kind of more equal than
and to your point,
others.
Russians still define themselves largely as we beat Nazis. And
Yes.
that's like their unifying calling card.
And it's that negative identity that you almost see against with Americans as well, where it's like liberalism can't assert anything, so it becomes this kind of donut or bagel with a hole in it. So you can't really define, like, this is what it means to be a man in America right now. This is what it really means. Don't give me the non-aggression principle or I'm tolerant or whatever. This is what it means that my life has meaning. America isn't offering that. It's this liberalism is this kind of donut where there's an empty center and that it can't assert anything. And I think if anything, there's like Hitler in the center. Because you can define something of I'm not Hitler, basically, is like liberal morality. That sucks, and that will collapse. And I think the Soviet example is very interesting in this regard. You can't just define yourself on the basis of we beat the Nazis.
So what does so I still reject this. I hope I'm idealistic because I would hope that we can do something that doesn't require a common enemy. But like, if it had to be one, like what would it be?
Islam could play that role.
Jeez.
I think
that won't work anymore, actually, because now all these fucking conservative simps. It's so goddamn funny because 4 years ago, I fought against so many conservatives who were like, I think that women are sluts and they shouldn't do this. I'm like, listen, bro. And I'd say this just to trigger the fucking. It kind of sounds like you're talking about Sharia law. Like, no, we don't mean that. We would never do that. Blah blah. But now you've got all these fucking Tate fans.
Together,
yeah, they're like, actually, Muslims are pretty fucking based. Women can't drive. They're not allowed to have a say politically sometimes. Like, they have to stay in the house. Well, like, I don't know. Maybe Tate was right when he converted. I was like, what the fuck? You guys were like 5 years late to the show. So I don't even know if you could get conservatives on that one.
No, you can't now. I think Andrew Tate phenomenon is actually incredible because he's the biggest man slut on earth on one direction.
Gambling, haram shit.
Right.
Yeah.
He's
runs
a
casinos.
criminal on another direction. He is a Muslim on another direction and a masculinity icon. I mean, yeah, it's crazy. But so I don't think the Islam thing will work, although that was tried to some extent. But I think Russia as a big bad enemy is a positive manifestation, and I think Putin could kind of serve that purpose. But there also has to be this assertion of who are we?
In opposition to whoever we fight against.
And, right? In opposition, but it's also an assertion. It's not an argument, and it's not about tolerance, not about liberalism. It's an assertion of identity. Identity is not an argument. Identity is an assertion.
Sure.
And that is what we need.
Is there any common ground that really stands out to you in terms of Americans, like stuff that we really can agree on? Because it is hard to find almost anything.
Yeah.
I don't think so, actually. And this is always my biggest argument against Fuentes, because and anytime I would debate somebody on the very far right, I say, we need to defend our Eurocentric, whatever, American identity. It's like, give me some common values between, like, the gayest dude in San Francisco and, like, a fucking farmer in rural Texas. And, like, you just can't. And the reality is, like, I can point to countries around the world where conservatives are going to be way more aligned with, like, Saudi Arabian values versus, like, the Rainbow Road and fucking Seattle people's values or whatever. And the reality is that, like, yeah, it's really hard to find a unifying identity in the United States. And again, it's the gayest thing I've ever said, but, like, I really do think it is all of the different opinions that we have here that still function under one system that makes us, like, truly unique as a country. But I mean, maybe it's not enough. I don't know. Like, do you ever play PlayStation or Xbox or whatever? This
Yeah.
fucking drove me crazy as a kid. You could never just play one or the other. You had to fucking hate the other group too. You ever notice that? It's like, oh yeah, I play PlayStation. It's like,
Super
true.
Nintendo and
Fuck
Genesis
Halo.
for me, but yeah.
Oh sure, yeah.
Mortal
Everybody would always,
Kombat 2 didn't have blood on the Super Nintendo, but it did on Genesis.
Oh.
So we were looking. I was a Super Nintendo guy too, and this was just an example where clearly I had to get a fucking Game Genie if I wanted the blood
put
to be the
blood
right
in?
color. Yeah.
yeah, because otherwise it'd be green.
Yeah.
I remember that.
I was deeply offended.
But yeah, it feels like every time when you're in a fucking group, it's like, why can't you just fucking like yourselves? It happens a lot with the CRT and the anti-black stuff where it's like, fuck white people. It's like, bro, why can't you just be happy for yourselves? Like, do you really have to? Or for white people and hating black people?
It's because we're animals. I don't. We're mammals, and that's why we do that. I mean, that's like the simplest answer. But I'm not saying that we should do this like merely on tribalism or like, I hate my neighbors because they're, they root for a different football team or whatever. What I'm arguing for is there does need to be a bigger ideological assertion, and I think this might come in a way after we go through this period. I think Biden, he's managing things. It's just fine, but I think we're all kind of aware that we're kind of at the end of something.
Maybe.
And what's going to come after that? I think there are going to be some competing visions for a world order. Obviously, communism was a competing vision for a world order. Fascism was a competing vision for a world order. Islam can do that. It can function in that way. It has in the past. And it can create some discipline in society. I
feel like something that sucks today, and maybe it was an artifact, or maybe it happened in the history too. I don't know. But it feels like everything today is so politicized that it's really, really, really hard that we can't take credit for sick shit that we do anymore. Like in '69, landing on the moon was really fucking cool. That must have been a really cool day to be an American when you're sitting down and you're watching TV and we fucking landed on the moon. That's awesome shit. But nowadays, it feels like every American invention is immediately claimed or castigated based on your political rivalry. So for instance, I might trigger you, I don't know where you guys stand on this. I personally think that the vaccination was like a fucking model success of fucking capitalism. That U.S. companies, through innovation and working with other companies around the fucking world, biotech in Germany, manufacturing in fucking Switzerland, we found a way to create an insanely sophisticated vaccine in like 8 months.
It should have been like landing on the moon, right?
That's so cool. And it
like
happened. Yeah, and Trump obviously wants credit for it. But like, no, that's political shit. Or, I'll give the flip side, since I know a lot of right-leaning people are triggered right now. I personally, and I fucking hate the guy because I think politically he's the most cringy fucking dude in the world, but Elon Musk with electric cars and rockets are cool. That's fucking awesome. The first time you saw one of those fucking SpaceX rockets come back and land on the fucking planet, that was the sickest shit in the world. And same thing with electric vehicles. I mean, we probably would have gotten there eventually, but no doubt, I don't even like Teslas that much because the build quality is iffy, but he did something really fucking cool with Teslas. There's charging stations all over the United States. Electric cars are being taken seriously. The car company is worth more than like every fucking car company on the planet, but we can't give credit. And these are American inventions. SpaceX and Tesla and the vaccine, these are American things, but it's all like held politically hostage now. So you said before we have to have like we have to have domestic and international, but it feels like the international facing version is like, it's like two parents disciplining a child. Mom and dad can't provide a unified front when they're fighting with each other constantly.
Right.
And in the United States, when both sides are trying to tear each other the fuck apart, like how the fuck can we even present some kind of unified front to the rest of the world? Now with Biden, we're talking about how we want to help Ukraine, we want to save them, we want to provide a strong American vision. And before under Trump, we were like, we want to disband NATO and fuck the rest of the world.
Right.
And you've got people like Angela Merkel and the Australian Prime Minister and the Mexican President president saying like, well, we can't rely on America for shit anymore. And yeah, we're like schizophrenic in terms of domestic ideas. We hate each other so much that even when we accomplish good shit, we can't take credit for it. And it makes it impossible to provide like a unified vision of what America is and stands for to the rest of the world.
I agree. Yes, but I basically that's why I'm suggesting that we're kind of at the end of this era, because you do need to do that.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we need to. Well, I think we need to do. I don't know if we're at the end of an era. We always find a way to keep going on, but
Right.
A few publications were predicting like a vibe switch coming soon, and I think that was probably largely in terms of the arts or just people's overall disposition. But it does feel like the world as a whole is kind of growing tired of this sort of constant infighting and battling between both sides, and it does seem like there's got to be something on the other side of it, but nobody's really sure how that could possibly manifest itself at this point.
because yeah,
I hope so.
Fucking political pundits. We feed into each other what the media does and what people want. Like, media wants to blame people for being stupid. People want to blame the media, even though they keep watching it. There needs to be conscious decisions. I think it has to come from media first. And when I say media, I include alternative media as well. So people like you and me, you have to make the conscious decision to start to bridge gaps, right? You can do partisan content for your entire life, but you are fucking evil and you're destroying the country when you do that. When you do hyper partisan content, you are saying that like we are different from these people on a fundamental level. They're evil, we're good, and we're gonna fight that fight and advocate for a fucking national divorce or whatever some people are fighting for. It's like, no, fuck you. We're Americans. You need to be able to talk to the guy that either wears a hood or wears a black fucking hoodie and wants to kill cops or whatever. You have to be able to bring these people together and talk. And if you're not willing to do that, you are actively contributing to the destruction of the country, in my opinion.
I totally agree. And I think there is space for someone who can lean out of polarization, because right now the most successful politicians just lean into it so hard and it just becomes nasty and meaningless. And there is a space, but again, it's like kind of an empty space, because I don't know, Biden hasn't quite successfily done that, even though he genuinely tried.
I give him credit for it,
maybe just due to his age, basically. Is why he isn't successful, but also why he tried, because he can remember kind of back then.
Yeah, well, because he was a senator for like fucking 7,000 fucking years, right? And yeah, he's talked to and worked with.
He's also like, me and these segregationists, we used to get things done over in
they
Washington.
did.
Go to the old Ebbett Grill and have a liquid lunch, if you know what I mean. Yeah, so I mean, that's who he is. I think Trump at his best kind of tried that.
And I wish he talked about it. Dude, there were so many fucking people on the campaign trail where it's like, are you going to turn it on and be the businessman that I think you can be?
Right. But like, if you look at him most charitably, you could say he was kind of trying that, but he didn't. He leaned into it. He leaned into insane conspiracy cults at the end. I mean, it was a disaster. But there is a kind of space for something, and that's why I do think that we need to talk about these things religiously, like a vibe shift or something. It's almost like the polar magnetism is going to switch or something. It switches every few thousand.
Really,
years.
Vibe is like a new age word for spirituality.
Well, I
really think about it, right?
There is some kind of collective consciousness and a collective mood, and I don't think I'm being like woo woo in saying that, in the sense of what is the kind of music that defines a period where you just hear it and you know where it is? Mm-hmm. Like if you think about the 80s and like synth pop or Madonna or Just Can't Get Enough and all that kind of stuff, you're immediately kind of transported to that time. And at the same time, a kind of like the nihilism of punk, of like actively being out of tune and screaming and slamming your instruments, that also defined a particular era. And even if it wasn't the most popular music, it was the kind of it was the music that defined the vibe of that period. So I do think we act collectively in this way. I think that's a very real thing.
And it's interesting because like when I started doing hip hop podcasts like 2016, so around the same time that you were kind of invigorated with politics and in a different level, and generally even within the hip hop community, almost everybody would agree that music at this point, hip hop is like incredibly bland, and that hip hop is ready for something new, something exciting, something that doesn't feel so stale. We just have no idea what it is. And I kind of feel like that's the general overall theme, because when I interviewed Nick Fuentes, I was ready to be on fucking Media Matters and ready to be torn apart for having a conversation with him, and nobody gave a fuck. And a few years ago, I would have been extremely worried about having a conversation with you. I'm quite sure nobody's going to give a fuck. It just feels like in a lot of ways.
Surely they'll give a fuck.
They'll give it some kind of fuck, but it's just not going to be anything.
Yeah,
that's
I'm probably going to get more heat for this conversation than you.
Well, don't you think rock is, I mean, again, I'm more of like a rock guy that
Right, yeah.
whatever. But like, don't you think it's dead in a way? Like,
Oh yeah,
do you-
guitar-driven music is at this bizarre
Yeah,
state
It's
of
not just
affairs, yeah.
guitar driven me. The problem, and I am an advocate for capitalism. I fucking love capitalism. I'm a big capitalist, jerk it off all day. I'll fight for my markets every day of the week. But holy shit, art being like subsumed by capitalism was a not good thing, right?
Well,
Where
I
you have
almost
like
don't
the-
even blame capitalism
Well-
for this. I think it's actually much deeper. And yeah, there's the commercialization or boy bands or whatever. I think that, but
Because the
like-
issue is like rock bands and shit used to be like, I think that was it Grohl from Nirvana or whatever. It used to, like, yeah, you get a bunch of kids, playing
Right.
guitars. They suck shit in garages and they suck shit over and over and over and over and over again until eventually they get on stage and they start doing cool shit.
Oh, yeah,
But
look.
now you've got like an exec and it's like that 9-year-old girl is gonna be a fucking star. Let's take her and fucking mold her, and we're gonna make all these singers. We're gonna make this like overproduced rap and hip hop and everything, and all of it is so different.
When I look at
than where
somebody
it
like
used to
Billie
be.
Eilish, who is made a ton of amazing music, but it's like somebody like her, it would have been nice to be able to see her have some sort of young adulthood, going
Yeah.
to clubs and shows and experiencing live music, and instead she has this seed of potential, and the labels just sink their teeth into her and turn her into a superstar, and she's never able to have any kind of like real life prior to
but
that.
I think I agree with everything you just said, but I actually think it's deeper than that. So I mean, if you remember, I mean, I'm how old are you? Adam?
39.
39. Okay, so we're closer in age. And do you remember like release of Nirvana Nevermind album?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little young, but I remember how
Yeah.
exciting it was. Yeah.
It was super exciting. Everyone was talking about it. Your parents were talking about it. The teachers were worried about it. And it defined a particular moment in American history. And again, Kurt Cobain, is he a good musician? No. But there was something about him that he just like tapped into a zeitgeist. I'm speaking generalities, but it's true. I don't think we have that. Now everything is completely fragmented. I think U2 served that purpose. Achtung Baby which was recorded in Berlin while the wall was coming down. It was like they had just plugged into history at that
It's hard
point.
but there are still
But
like
we
there are
don't
things
have
that we
anymore.
get.
Let me finish real quick.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Now we're fragmenting, and there's a lot of cool stuff. Like someone who's talented can go on SoundCloud and just produce with their synthesizer computer something really great. And I love this. I support this. But it doesn't speak to us as a population. It doesn't define a moment. And all of the genres that people like are nostalgic. So I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine who's in his early 20s, and he was saying, oh yeah, hipster girls that he dates or whatever, they're listening to Nirvana in 2023.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
that's cool, I guess, but you're not getting it. Like, you don't understand what 1991 was. And the kind of declinism that was actually kind of setting in, the confusion about the end of the Cold War, the pro campaign was coming up. We had done pop music to its limit. We needed to just shove it in reverse and do just grunge, punk kind of stuff. And we don't have a collective body in that sense.
Or is it bad because we're too collective though? Because that's what I wonder too, and that like it's just because it's so national and international. I remember my mom and dad used to be in the Air Force, and they would tell me that they went to they served over in Okinawa, the base we had in Japan, and they would tell me that when they would go to these countries, as soon as you stepped off base, you're in like a whole other world. It's like the cultural customs are different, the sounds are different, the people, everything's different. I've traveled, I don't want to say the whole world, but I've been to a lot of different countries now. And everywhere I go, bro, I remember in fucking, I remember this happened on 2 occasions. It happened in Poland and it happened in Taiwan, where I heard people driving up and down the street playing, you remember Gangnam Style?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's kind of funny. A really popular fucking South Korean song is like, I heard it all the time in the US. And all of the culture that we export is now everybody's kind of like on the same page. And I wonder sometimes, like, does that hurt?
And it's ironic, and the lack of sincerity to Gangnam Style or whatever that was. That was kind of like, surely that was ironic on some level.
Oh yeah.
That whole thing. I mean, and so it's this like irony and nostalgia and just these like layers of distance between something sincere. Whatever you want to say about Nirvana, that was sincere music.
Sure.
But
But then also, I will say too that it's hard to say like how much stuff do we have today that we wouldn't have in our current environment too. So for instance, like Kendrick Lamar, it's a really good rapper, really great writing. Like would he have been able to exist when we only had like like
Sure.
gangster rap or like West Coast East Coast stuff with that kind of writing and that kind of person, or like Tyler the Creator, where you've got like some people that are like bi or like other kind of identities, like would they have been able to make it in those environments back then too? You would know better than I.
Well, I
right?
mean, like when we talk about no longer having a monoculture, you're part of the problem because the reason why you don't see albums doing the incredible album sales that you used to see 20 years ago or whatever is because you have large chunks of society who are watching fucking Destiny re-uploads. Not to mention like
Right.
even just within hip hop, when they look at how bad album sales are these days, I'm like, well, there's all these hip hop based podcasts and Twitch streamers and creators, etc., who are out here making content, and I feel like the people on average are being trained to crave conversation more than music, and even a lot of the most like ordinary normie ass hip hop consumers that I know have essentially stopped listening to rap like probably 90% as much as they used to because now they're consumed by the resulting conversation around the culture.
Right.
Which I think plays into my earlier argument about like the information overload. Like
Mm.
back then, I remember back when I was a kid, little younger than you guys. I'm 34, but like new albums being released by certain people. Dude, when there was when Meteora came out from fucking Linkin Park, bro, and the whole ritual behind like going to the store, buying the CD, and you can't listen to it there. You got to fucking drive home. You got to pop it in your CD player, and you can't skip for it. You just have to sit there and you got to listen to it from start to finish. When Kid A came out, Radiohead albums came out, like these were monumental things.
Yeah.
And now it's like you're inundated with media and cool shit from everybody everywhere. And I guess it feels a little bit less special. It's harder to like take it for like when a new Final Fantasy came out, it was like a really big deal in the video game world. And now there's like AAA titles being released like every month, every 2 weeks, and it's like whatever.
Can this type of society be managed? Because again, like even I'm in my mid 40s. I can remember when the big three networks were still a thing. Tom Brokaw, Dan Rather, Peter Jennings. They were kind of father figures. They could kind of define the general mainstream opinion of things. I can't name the nightly news broadcasters.
Anderson Cooper. No, I know what you mean.
You know what? I could name him, of course, but yeah.
I don't even know if he's a night broadcaster. I think he just has a show, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Even Anderson Cooper is kind of ironic, and he's almost the Seth Meyers equivalent in a way.
Yeah.
So we don't have that stability. There was a way to manage a technological society through these big structures like this, like the music industry. Hollywood inflected our dreams. It taught us what our fantasies were. It gave us myths and so on. Now, maybe those are bad myths. We could talk about that, but it was something that was unifying. And now we're in this world of just total fragmentation where it's like I signed up for TikTok just for a little bit. I deleted the app. But
good for you.
You were being spied on?
What?
The CCP was watching you?
They knew who I was. I could go into this. They figured out exactly who I was almost immediately, and they were serving me like MILFs wearing cowboy boots and Texas hats. So they kind of knew where I was from. And then they started serving me even weirder shit. But they got into my brain almost immediately. I didn't subscribe to a single person, and they pegged me. It was scary.
Wow.
Yeah.
TikTok those algorithms are on every social. It's so funny because people always like bring back the feed where we can just see things chronologically. Like, that's what we want. It's like that's not what you want.
No,
these
you want
algorithms
that.
plug into your fucking brain
And
like
now on
crazy.
Twitter, you have the two feeds side by side, and you get to see just how boring the chronological order of
everybody
your
always
friends
says
is.
bring it back. Nobody wants that, bro. These companies, like
Yeah.
I know guys that work. You don't want chronological feeds. You want them,
But it's
tailoring
something
content
different. So, but previously it was like Hollywood, CBS, etc. They gave you a message, and it was a kind of top-down system, and you can manage society this way. I think the algorithm is doing something different, and I'm not sure I even quite have the words to describe what's happening, because it's getting into your head. It's like finding out the fantasies you wouldn't even admit to, because it could tell how long you look at the video.
Yeah.
I don't know if
there's
it's
even for
tracking
like
eye
on
movement.
YouTube. I don't know if you guys have figured this out yet. Subscribers don't actually matter that much anymore. Like how many subs a channel has,
Right.
Because most people's content that they watch is just on their suggested page,
Right.
and whether or not you're subscribed to somebody doesn't even necessarily guarantee that a video is put there.
Right.
It's dude. I remember back in 2008, 2010, like the way to game shit was to like hide keywords and like the header of like your HTML for like the web page. page and shit. Everything is so sophisticated these days in terms of how stuff figures out, and there's so much.
Right.
There's so much content. Like if you wanted to watch a fucking podcast, like you can follow like maybe 3 or 4 or whatever, but like there's like a million hours of every fucking show that's released all the time, and it's harder to find those monumental releases that everybody
Right.
used to look forward to. The new fucking Radiohead album, the new
Right.
fucking Kurt Cobain, the new fucking Pink Floyd or whatever, going back further, the new Beatles shit. Because there's just so much shit.
And that's why when it comes time to elect a president, it feels kind of ridiculous. It's like, oh, so we're all supposed to agree on 1 or 2 people at this point?
Yeah, maybe,
Yeah.
Jews.
Right. But this is a huge problem. I think also with the algorithm, there's that question of, is it figuring out your fantasy or is it kind of incepting something?
Telling you.
Yeah, because I was actually joking with this friend of mine because we were talking about this exact subject, and I was joking. I was like, "Why is it giving me all these advertisements for gay cruises?" It wasn't actually, but yeah. But there's that. It's figuring out some inner fantasy, but there's also that notion of it's incepting something into you, and so
Possibly.
it's giving you the fantasy, and that's something that Hollywood was really able to do. It certainly did it for me with all these, Indiana Jones and E.T. and all that kind of stuff that I still
Mhm.
love. I mean, it was able to kind of give you new ways to dream. And I'm wondering, like this algorithm, it's doing it very differently. You don't go sit down for 2 hours in a movie theater that's collective with your parents, maybe, or a date. You're just scrolling.
Yeah, because everything
5
is so
seconds.
overwhelming. Like,
Yeah.
it's really hard for a lot of fucking Zoom. Bro, I had a girl that I was talking to, this 23-year-old girl, and she asked me the question, or I think I asked her about like, oh, like, is there, I think it was something like, what kind of movies do you like, whatever. And she's like, oh, like, I really like the Prestige. Have you ever seen that movie or like the clips? And I'm like, what the fuck do you mean? Have
Right.
I seen the clips? I was like, what the fuck do you mean when you say have I seen clips of the movie? You're either asking me if I've seen the movie or not. And like for a lot of Zoomers, for a lot of people like 22, it's hard to even get them to sit down and watch a full movie, let alone like without your cell phone. Like,
She's
holy
kind of
shit.
adapting that from us though too, because anytime you watch a debate or a Twitch conversation or whatever, there'll be a conversation about some piece of content, and somebody will say, "I've seen a couple clips. I didn't watch the whole 3-hour
Right.
thing or
Sure.
whatever." So she thinks that it's normal to say that.
Yeah, to
about
see
a
clips
full-length
of shit.
film,
I
which
know
is
what they're going to
hilarious.
clip out of what I just said.
Sure, yeah. Which is part of what I like about my channel, because I still have like the full 2 or 3 hour videos rather than like, but yeah, I mean, now I've gotten into the TikTok game and YouTube Shorts and like cutting up short
Yeah,
stuff.
well,
and
it's kind of a
everything.
weird feeling even doing podcasts these days, because you kind of know that they're going to get more views on TikTok than they ever are on a platform where you're actually being paid for it.
Although to be fair, that those views mean less. I'd rather have 150,000 views on a YouTube video than 1 million views on a TikTok clip, because I know that the type of engagement, I mean, one, you get paid more for it, but like the type of engagement is a much bigger buy-in from those 150,000 people versus the TikTok people that just like scroll, you know?
Very true. And it's supposed to be good for your amplification and everything, but a lot of times you wonder.
Yeah. Hopefully like if I get like 10 million views on a TikTok video, I hope I've driven at least like, I guess like 50 or 60 people more to like my long form
I mean,
content.
I can see it sometimes where there's a clip where a girl said that she wanted to get shit on, and that was many years ago, and every once in a while it'll pop up on TikTok and get 10 million views, and then I'll go back and look at the original VOD, and people manage to find it, and like 10 million views will equal out to like an extra 50 to 100,000 on the actual YouTube video, which...
Or you see like big TikTokers will have like 1, 2, 3 million followers, and then they'll try to stream and they get like 50 viewers.
Yeah, it's
'Cause the conversion is, like, so
streaming is
crazy,
a
yeah.
much more dedicated connection.
Yeah, there's no story, there's no narrative, and I think that's a very interesting change in culture, where you're looking at maybe a clip of a movie or something like that, or you're looking at just some like weird, kind of thing where like a girl will just do something kind of silly in her apartment and or do a voiceover or all this kind of there's no narrative. We've lost, and again, as like humans, and maybe even kind of deeper with animals, but certainly as humans, that's how we communicate through narrative.
For
That's
sure.
how we understand the world. That's how we even understand things scientifically, is a kind of
Narratively.
story that you can tell. And we're getting that ripped away from us. And I don't even know what the implications of this are going to be for the human experience, but they're going to be huge.
It feels like this is the worst comparison I've ever made in a serious conversation in my life. But do you guys watch Marvel movies?
No,
I've seen some. But
I've heard about them.
There was we were all these Marvel movies that were building up all these heroes and characters to these like two grand, huge movies. It was Avengers Endgame, or it was Infinity War and Endgame, and I think these are like some of the biggest superhero movies like of all fucking time.
Sure.
But at the end of Endgame, you had like the completion of like I think like almost 7 different character arcs. And Marvel has been trying really hard releasing new superheroes movie. They call it like phase 3, phase 4 to figure out like their personality or their stories or their arcs afterwards. But after the ending of that one huge conclusion to a lot of the superheroes, the death of some, the finishing of others, like people like don't care anymore. And it's just like random superheroes that they don't care about and movies that are like meh. They're not like horrible, but they're just like meh. And it feels like a bit of an analogy to, but neither of you understand it, so I'm just talking to myself. But yeah.
No, I
feels like to an
I
analogy to like
understand what you're
America,
saying.
where it's like, yeah, we beat communism, we won the Cold War, we landed on the fucking moon, we beat Hitler, and now we're fighting against or for trans kids, I guess, is like what the whole conversation nationally, like, what was it fucking, was it like I just saw Matt Walsh like went to fucking Mississippi and he's like, today I stand in proud honorary talking about this new anti-transing the kids bill, and I'm like, is this really all conservatives have to talk about today?
Okay.
Like, what the fuck?
When you look at somebody like Matt Walsh, and it feels like in some ways he's doing like an updated version of what you were doing in 2016, right?
definitely.
Like what's the feeling in your stomach when you see what he's putting out there to the world?
I feel that I need to do something radically different because the fact is I agree that the vibe of the alt-right has been totally absorbed into conservative ink. And I think that's one of the kind of, in a way, kind of misunderstood things. I think also mainstream people are in a way much more radical than marginal people, which is another, I think J6 was kind of emblematic about that. It was this normies getting together, and next thing you know, they're like overturning the government.
We're trying to,
I mean, pretty remarkable stuff. But yeah, there's no doubt that the Matt Walsh, he's not going to touch on race or race realism or the Jewish question or whatever. He's not going to do that exactly. Although someone like Crowder kind of does. In this kind of
Crowder,
funny
I
way.
think, has positioned himself as like, I think he's trying, because Trump and Trump company is falling apart, or has
Right.
been since the last kind of like middle elections. Oh my God,
Mhm.
midterms. And there's like the Daily Wire is poised as like that center right. We want to be the voice of the mainstream modern day Republican.
Right.
And I think Crowder is like, well, there's a lot of populists and shit that are from the Trump camp that you guys are ignoring. And I think Crowder wants to be the guy there to absorb all of those types of people. So
Well,
he's going to
right.
sit a bit far. So Shapiro won't even touch the Jewish question, obviously, because he's fucking Jewish and he's Ben Shapiro.
Well, he'll touch the Jewish question, but in his own
very,
way,
very
yeah.
barely. But Crowder will
Well,
definitely.
it's
Crowder's
like-
never going to come out and be like,
He'll
you know,
endorse the
Jews
Jewish
are.
question.
Yeah, Crowder's
Yeah.
never going to come out and be like, Jews are controlling media. But he'll be like, there are a lot of Jews that are in positions.
He
you think, right?
basically said that.
Yeah,
He's
he'll
like, a
he'll
lot
dance
of people
around
with
it.
Jewish
Yeah.
names in Hollywood. I don't know.
But he's not even going to go as
but-
far right as like Fuentes is today.
No,
right?
he's not going to do
Crowder, yeah.
Fuentes. But I guess my general point is that situationally, the alt-right was in complete opposition to the conservative movement in 2016.
Mhm.
That was the entire cuck thing. That was not about liberals.
Mhm.
That was 100% about conservative cucks.
Yeah.
You know, you're losers, you're
I mean,
fat,
where
you're
did
boring.
Groypers came from? Like what, bullying Charlie Kirk and shit, right? Like that's where a lot of the American First Movement came from, was fighting like establishment conservatives. Yeah.
True, but even that was more like, you know, why don't you fulfill your own values? That was actually even more. The alt-right was really anti-conservative,
Mhm.
and the best opposition is the one you can control. And the degree to which the conservative movement and the Republican Party has adopted the memes, I mean, on the floor of Congress, Ernst from Iowa held up a meme on the floor with like the gamer blonde Chad, you know, meme.
Right.
Like they do this, and they're able to absorb the alt-right energy, and it's very successful for them because they need that kind of radical, angsty, outrageous, even up to the point of gas chamber memes or something. They've been able to attach that. Trump did it, but he did it in opposition to the Republican establishment.
Yeah, so
Which
it's
is
harder
very
to kind of
interesting.
take on, because I think Trump was really good for recruiting young people and recruiting like fiery like zeal
Yeah.
for people into the Republican Party, but he did it in opposition to the Republican establishment. So when Trump leaves, I don't know if a lot of that zeal
They're
kind of like
bringing it in.
disappears.
So
when
you
they're
s-
trying to, but
Yeah, I mean, like the Claremont Institute is very interesting in this regard. And I don't want to get too technical, but I think they have attempted to create an alt-right almost from central casting. So they found all these people who are lesser figures basically, and they're kind of fitting them into pegs of the alt-right.
yeah, it's hard though when Trump, like my parents my parents were ride or die Republicans their entire fucking lives. I grew up hardcore Republican. My mom is Cuban, so very, very ride or die Republicans.
Yeah.
And my parents today, if Trump were to run independent, they would vote for Trump in a heartbeat over any Republican. And I
That's
think there's still
interesting.
a lot of Trump fans. I would guess like 30 to 40% of Trump's like loyal people, like people that voted for Trump, would probably still vote for
Oh,
him if he
he
ran
could
independently.
screw over
Absolutely,
everything.
because you'd only have to really take what, like 4% of Republicans
he'll
to destroy
take
the
more
Republic,
than 4.
and he'll absolutely
Yeah.
take more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would
Yeah.
be over.
It would. But what's interesting, to go back to what I was saying, I think even the DeSantis campaign, I've seen these murmurings of them trying to bring in these influencer types, Pedro Gonzalez, Jack Murphy, all these kind of weird figures. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry, they're lesser lights. But they're trying to kind of recreate that for a new thing, almost like almost in a lab. They're doing an experiment to reproduce it. I think a lot of Elon's purchasing of Twitter has been about that. I mean, Elon has been promoting some pretty. I mean, he's replying
He's
with
fucking
emojis
insane.
to cat turd.
I
mean,
remember one
at
of his
some
first
point, it's
stories
just
after
like,
he
what
bought
the
it.
fuck are you-
He fucking retweeted that fucking story about Pelosi's husband got
Right.
attacked by his gay lover or whatever. I was like, bro,
And
what the
th-
fuck
and
are
then
you
he
saying right
eventually
now?
deleted it and didn't offer any explanation or anything.
Oh my god.
He's retweeting Medvedev, who's playing his own game in the Kremlin. He's trying to be the badass, talking about America's going to collapse in the next year. We'll nuke the world if we feel like we're losing. And Elon's like retweeting this, like, whoa, interesting. I've got to look into this. Like emoji face.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just,
Like I might be missing something, but I haven't seen that many conservatives lining up to defend Scott Adams after his most recent statements. But Elon responded and said the media is racist,
Right.
and pretty much completely took his side, which I don't think anybody expected him to weigh
Elon
in
is just
such a way.
fucking wild. I don't know. That guy's
But okay, let's throw Scott Adams out there. He's just recently had Dilbert removed from hundreds of newspapers because of his statements about black people hating white people and how white people should react by, completely separating themselves and not trying to help black people at all. What's going through your head when you see that story playing out?
well, he's a bit of a dweeb, and I'm not a fan of Dilbert or Scott Adams. But I'll say this because I have some conflicting feelings about this. The way he defined black identity as a hate group is contemptible and just weird and wrong. That was a
Yeah.
very strange poll of "It's okay to be white," which is a 4chan meme, as you know, is meant to provoke people.
And you can understand why black people would be a little offended by a question that they kind of take as insulting and stupid in the first place.
Right. But I think there's another element to it as well, because I mean, white people have been for a many decades now moving to the suburbs, going to a Christian school for the good schools and things like that. I mean, we have segregated in many ways. Now, obviously, Los Angeles maybe is different, of course.
not that different.
No, it's segregated maybe on a local level.
Yeah.
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 And I've lived in New York City for for a while. I definitely get it. You could go to places where you walk across a street and you're in a
You'll still
completely
see
different
fucking
world.
androgynous progressives will get on Twitter and be like, I don't know why you guys are so mean towards homeless people. And it's like, okay, because you've never fucking had a homeless guy screaming at you
I
from
get
right
that.
fucking behind you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that drives you crazy. They're
And-
very
and
much segregating
even,
themselves sometimes.
You know,
yeah.
Montana has 2 congressmen now, so we have the same amount of congressmen and senators because people are moving in. There's like a big sort going on of a lot of, I guess, red state people from California and Texas moving to Montana. It's just like one example. So segregation is happening, and yet he's kind of like talking about something that maybe shouldn't be talked about and articulating white identity in the worst possible way, which is that blacks want to go kill you or something because of a Pew Research poll. So it's kind of weird. I don't have any sympathy for Scott Adams. I just
I also think, going back to what I said earlier about our brains are bad at parsing information, you got to figure this out too. And I say the same thing for BLM or for racist white people. Like, if blacks wanted to kill white people, you'd be seeing a lot of it. It wouldn't just be like 1 or 2 stories get fucking huge of like the black kid attacking the teacher for the fucking Nintendo Switch or whatever the fuck. I don't know
Right.
what makes it stories. Yeah, it wouldn't just be one. You'd be seeing this every single day. Same thing with like if cops really were out there just wanting to indiscriminately murder black people. It wouldn't be like one huge story,
Right.
every couple months. You'd be seeing it daily, right? Because this is a 330 million person country. You see, there's a ton of people in this country. It's like over 500,000 cops. If there was crazy shit happen, you see it daily. But again, I think for humans, for our brains, it really only takes like 1 to 3 experiences to almost form an immovable stereotype. Like if you had 3 bad experiences with Chinese people in the course of a year or two, you're going to write off like 2 billion people. And that's just a superhuman
But
thing to do.
he's not
you know?
even he's not even like a teenager who got beat up by a black guy or something, which is kind of understandable that you would have you know
Sure.
be racist. He's like a social media dweeb. Who,
He is, but
read
like,
a
damn, dude.
poll.
Depending
It's
on
just
where you're at on
stupid.
social media, I can understand why you think like fucking people want to murder white people or whatever.
Well,
Because
that's
holy
the
shit, there are
dissident
some
right. The
crazy
dis-
social media bubbles out there.
the
That's
dissident-
not this is right. That's fucking progressives
it's-
saying crazy shit sometimes.
Oh well, that's true. Progressives will do it, but the dissident right is basically doom porn. I mean that is their identity. It is promoting videos of black high school students beating up a teacher, or a white girl who dated a black guy and is now like depicted with black eyes and a child.
I remember in the Trump shit, you remember there was that video when Trump was running? I think it was a video of like 6 black people beating up like was it a mentally handicapped white person?
Oh God!
And
yeah.
people were like, this is going to happen to Trump people all over the country are going to start getting killed by black people. I was like, bro, what the fuck? Yeah.
But I look, all of these things, you know, there's some factual accuracy to those things, but it's like, what does it tell you psychologically that you're obsessed about it? I mean, have you ever heard the notion of like a man who's obsessed with his wife cheating on him? Even if he's correct, he's still pathological. So what I mean by that is like if someone figured out that if you're obsessed with this notion, oh, she's looking at every guy, she's going around behind my back and so on, and then you figure out that it is true. Like 2 years ago, she had an affair, you know, in a moment of weakness. Maybe your response to that would be like, well, okay, let's you know, let's move forward. We can talk about it and so on. But with a pathological person, it's not it can't be okay. He's got to remain obsessed with it. So the pathology of obsession is there regardless of facts.
This is we spoke this about like J.K. Rowling, where it's like I don't think she necessarily makes the worst statements sometimes about trans stuff. I could definitely see places where I disagree, but god damn, when you're that fucking obsessed with it,
Yeah,
it feels like
exactly.
something else is going on. You know, Jesus, yeah.
Well, yeah, the evangelical preacher who's always talking about
gay people and shit, yeah.
You just know it's not everyone, but you just know that.
Yeah,
he's probably
Jesus, like
gay.
gay bad. We get it. We don't need to hear like the 37th fucking sermon on it. Like Jesus, like,
Exactly.
tell
So-
me you want to take it up the ass without saying you want to take it up the ass. Like Jesus, dude.
Yeah. So it's like, what is the pathology of the right? And it's not just even the dissident right. I think it's actually a lot of the mainstream right does this exact kind of thing. What is it that you want to watch videos of your race being demeaned and their asses kicked?
Almost like some
What
like
is it?
cuckoldry fetish of like, yeah, like I
Bingo.
did you see the Libs of TikTok video yesterday where there was this blue-haired teacher talking to fucking kids about like
Exactly.
fucking transing the children? It's like, bro, fucking
Why
chill
are
out.
you watching? I was talking to a friend who was saying like construction workers, when they'd have an hour off, they're looking at TikTok. And I'm like, what in the hell has gone wrong? I thought you guys would be, I don't know, like drinking beers or like
Yeah.
shooting pool or something. What the fuck? You're looking at TikTok. And again, it's that like you dive into that world of libs of TikTok and you think every public school teacher is a crazed lunatic child rapist or something. And it's
Yeah.
just this weird, masochistic indulgence in that.
Or like the
that
perfect
skews
example
your
of this
mind.
was that there was that Pew poll that was like, what percentage of Americans do you think are trans?
And people said
And it was like
80.
27% of like people, and I'm like, bro, are you fucking wild? But then I don't even blame people for thinking about that because it's like Leah Thomas, we're talking about her for like 3 weeks on the news. Republicans are so obsessed with trans people right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, Jesus, like the national conversation, you would think that like, yeah, half of America is like fucking transed out right now or something. And it's like,
Yeah, it's
frustrating.
It's masochistic cucks is the weird thing. Why are you so obsessed with that?
the thing, when we talk about all of this, and I reiterate this every time I have a debate where I feel like this wasn't productive, we didn't talk about anything worth talking about. The reason why I get so upset about some of these issues, or why I get upset about like Matt Walsh signing, or not signing a bill, but going and championing that bill in Mississippi about like not transing the kids, is because we have limited attention and we have limited time to speak. And when you speak on some issues, you ignore other issues. So Matt Walsh going to talk about how he supported some bill in Mississippi to keep kids from getting trans. Like Mississippi is ranked 50 out of 50 for infant mortality, and it's ranked 50 out of 50 for childhood poverty. If you care about fucking children, well, not fucking children. If you fucking care about children, let me rephrase that. If you fucking care about children, why not speak to these issues? And I'm not saying that you can only talk about one thing at a time, but it's very clear that like we're very ideologically driven in the things we care about. And I feel like sometimes we dedicate so much of our attention to shit that like isn't that important. And damn, I would say so much of the way that I view life in American politics is, I hate to say this because I never would have said this would have happened when I was 20. But now that I have a child who's 11 years old, it definitely changes the way that I view a lot of society. I'm like, man, there are so many things that would be cool that I could talk about in favor of enriching my child's life, especially if I wasn't rich in terms of enriching child life. And I would just be so upset if every conversation was about fucking trans teachers.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus Christ. Like, my kid, like, and I get so sad. Like, I get emails and this shit. They're doing a donation drive for like $400 to buy shit for the classroom. And it's like, the fact that you even have to do that. I live in a wealthy school district. That's fucking insane that you don't have the money to do this. Like, holy shit. But we're just talking about like grooming teachers and teachers with weird fucking pronouns. I was like, fuck, there are so many more important conversations we should be having.
This gets to what I think has been a theme of this discussion, which is just we've lost this bigger channel of who we are and what we want to assert, and we're endlessly like drowning in fragmentation and nonsense. And yeah, it's where we are though.
But is there a part of you that has some respect for somebody like Matt Walsh or Chris Rufio, who's
No.
clearly who's I would say that if we take those two and we look at them in comparison to maybe like the career arcs that you and Milo went through in 2016, it's like they have seemed to be quite a bit more effective at pushing their ideas into the mainstream and making this a constant source of conversation, even if their overall disposition might be a little cynical.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, in the sense of Milo or Richard Spencer flaming out or, flying too close to the sun and burning, fair criticism. I would say, though, that Matt Walsh and Rufio have a tremendously greater support system than I did, in the sense that
Because they're mainstream on their ideas. They're not pushing boundaries, right? Matt Walsh and shit, right?
Right.
Because Milo and Spencer are living
kinda.
at the edges of like what is acceptable, and then oftentimes going beyond it.
Right.
But like Matt Walsh is like, he's fucking employed by the fucking Daily Wire,
No
right?
doubt.
Like, this is not a guy that's living on the edge of life. Like,
Look,
he's
And
very
he was like
safe
a
and-
the
Daily
fact that
Wire
they were-
C-lister for a long time.
Sure,
too,
The
right?
fact that they were trying to pay Crowder like $30 million for a YouTube
Yeah.
show, I mean, that is totally nuts.
To anyone who had
That
any
demonstrates
doubts
that.
about how valuable you could be within the conservative world, that was a moment where, for me, I'm like, oh, okay, so these guys are fucking killing it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, meanware they're talking about being canceled by everybody. And it's like, yeah.
Right, and
Crowder
you're
shooting
you're
down
better
like
than Crowder. I mean, not that that's a high bar. I mean, it's like they.
He took a shtick. He's going to the college campuses trying to have his mind changed.
Bro, that was a good idea. I copied that shit. It was a good video.
Yeah, but so there is a massive infrastructure that is going to support them. Rufio worked with creationism and young Earth stuff before. He's now gone into this kind of race baity critical race theory. But there's a big infrastructure of conservatism behind them, and so that, I mean, I can grant them something in the sense that Matt Walsh is articulate, but that's about it.
If you were in charge of the books in your child's library, what would be the ones that you'd want to remove?
The Bible.
Jesus.
Wow. Didn't see that coming.
No, I say that. That was a bit of a joke. I mean, I am very critical of Abrahamic religion,
Right.
but I do think, in a way, you need to read the Bible. I think most Christians haven't read the Bible; they know almost next to nothing about it. You need to read it and really understand it. So that was a joke. But which ones would I remove? I mean, it's a kind of non-issue, because it's like, okay, I don't want I have a son and daughter. I don't want them reading some of these just kind of weird shit, that Matt Walsh is complaining about. I agree, and they're not going to. But like, what am I seriously concerned about? Being that they're kind of pushing preteen, it's watching hardcore pornography on an iPad. That's endlessly more impactful on their psyche
That is
than
a good point.
maybe you went to the library and saw a gay book where it's like cartoon characters. And so it's like, let's go after the real thing. That is a really serious issue. And again, in mid 40s, I can remember internet porn when it was first coming out, and like the page would load slowly, like it would take a few
Memories.
minutes. It was almost like a strip tease in a kind of funny way.
Half the time it just wouldn't load. You just left waiting.
Right.
Or you didn't get the right video. Your real player opens and
a
it's
dude.
Video. What are you
fucking-
talking about?
So-
We're-
well,
we're-
I was on Kazaa, so we downloaded videos there, and instead of getting like this 30 fucking minute porn video of some woman sucking a dick, it ends up being like the whole album of like Limp Bizkit, and it's like the clean version, and it's like, fuck me, I guess, yeah,
right.
fuck that, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is this kind of stuff is so much more serious than just some library book that they're probably not going to. I mean, they're reading a book. That's probably like a good step forward to begin with.
I think
But
when it
they're
comes,
not really willing to do that. I mean, I think there's this anxiety about culture in general, and they try to solve this problem in kind of the dumbest way possible.
it can't be solved in schools. Have you ever?
No.
I hate to be this guy, but I'll always be this guy. Have you ever watched The Wire?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm one of. Have you seen it?
I've never seen The Wire.
Okay.
I'm one of those guys that watches The Wire and says it's the greatest show ever.
I watched it
am.
like a couple years ago, so
Oh,
it's still
sure.
sort of fresh in my
Yeah.
mind.
So you remember? I think season 4 was about the schools, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. You. By the time the kid is at school, you can't. You're not fixing his problems. Like you're
Right.
fucked at that point.
Right.
Especially, God, you've got these teachers making fucking $42,000 a year or whatever, or $38,000 a year, and they're tasked with what is arguably or almost inarguably the most important job in our country is educating our children, and they're compensated like shit. They're put in positions, they're set up to fail in a lot of the times, and they're tasked with like fixing problems and creating children who are already like fucked before they even get into the classroom because of how fucked the family life can be sometimes.
No doubt.
And the idea that like we're gonna write culture or do something from the classroom is like, bro, there's like so much other things outside of that.
Well, look,
mhm.
the grooming issue. I mean, I perhaps we don't want to talk about this, but I mean, the grooming issue. So much of this takes place at home,
Sure.
and it takes place in really terrible ways. That it's not
Discord
about.
rooms and shit.
It's not even about homosexuality. It's something kind of sicker. But it's like that. That's a real issue. I don't even know how to solve that problem. Actually, the grooming that takes place in churches. That's a very serious
Damn, you're
issue.
very
Don't hear
anti-religion.
Chris Rufio talk about that.
Yeah.
You know, they want to put it on public school teachers or whatever. So again, it's just they're dealing with this anxiety and they're not solving the problem. I mean, I think the porn issue does have to be solved because we've never lived in a world like this where I can within 30 seconds I can have whatever fantasy or nightmare I could ever conceivably imagine just immediately accessible.
What
to
would be
me.
a reasonable approach towards, stopping the spread of porn or whatever that our society could actually take
I
part in?
think it could come in hand in hand with legalizing prostitution.
Mm.
And so whenever you hear Christians talk about porn, they get it completely wrong. They basically say things like it inspires rapists, it makes people want to go out and have extramarital affairs. It does the exact opposite. In fact, it's a sex substitute. You watch porn because you're not having sex. If anything, it's going to reduce rape or
It
extramarital
actually, studies
affairs.
show that it does reduce sexual assault. I don't know if it reduces the amount of sex, but when it comes to violent sexual crimes, sexual assault in countries that legalize things like prostitution, those numbers tend to come down.
Right. And look, what is the big problem right now? When I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was teenage pregnancy. They're having sex at school. Like, what are we going to do about it? What is the issue now?
Sexlessness, yeah.
Loneliness.
And those numbers
No
for teenage pregnancies and
friends
stuff
even.
have fallen,
Remember
like, pretty
teen
significantly.
pregnancy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
They
No
used to
one's
talk
remember,
about it all the fucking time. Never hear
16
about
and
it.
pregnant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, after school special stuff. That's not the issue now. So whether you can prove it or not, there's this major coincidence between ubiquity of porn and sexlessness. It's this grand irony that I don't think we've fully comprehended.
It's
And
like
so-
we take these problems and we fix them and we make like the newest ones in the funniest fucking way. I think that the funniest thing now is I think we're gonna get to a point where vaping is more pervasive than fucking cigarette smoking was
Well,
for teens.
I think
I'm addicted to nicotine lozenges. I'll admit
Oh
it.
shit, are you a vapor then?
I'm not a vapor. No,
Okay.
I've got one in right now.
Oh,
I need that
Jesus,
little
yeah.
nicotine
Yeah.
kick. But I got addicted to an anti-smoking aid, which is kind of funny.
Yeah,
But
well,
I
but I mean,
guess-
because vaping was originally, or
Yeah.
am I inventing this?
No, that's
vaping was
true, yeah.
originally like get rid of, you can
Exactly.
wean off smoking, and now you
Yeah.
can vape
And
instead.
if you look at the graph of like teenage cigarette use, it just absolutely
Plummeted.
plummets, and then the vaping just
takes
explodes.
off, and now you've got kids vaping that would have never smoked cigarettes,
Yeah.
but now they're vaping and doing tricks
Right.
and
I
shit.
went
And that's like,
snowboarding the other day for the first time, and I'm waiting at the bottom of the hill for my girl because she fell about 18 fucking times coming down the hill,
Uh-huh.
and I see countless people who hit the bottom of the hill and immediately take off their glove, reach into the pocket, and pull out the vape and just start huffing away on that
Yeah.
shit.
that has to be some extended fucking metaphor for where we're at in the country today.
Right.
And
in
it would be
terms of-
impractical for
This-
them to smoke a cigarette in that moment
Exactly,
too. So it's
yeah.
way easier to sort of segment it into their day. Yeah.
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 But this is what we have to think about. It's like the Christian response is kind of anti-sex and anti-life on some level. I mean, they're pro-life. more kids, fruitful and multiply. But part of being alive is sensuality. You know, part of being alive is lusting after things and chasing after girls and girls being excited by boys, and that's who we are. We don't want to end this. So I think we do need a kind of pro-life approach, and that's why I think porn needs to be curtailed to a great extent, not because it makes you deviant or sexual, but because it replaces sexuality. Like there was an older porn star that I read, he was talking about it, and he was saying, like, don't worry about me, like I'm just fine. Like I had sex with these beautiful women, like it was cool. I worry about the people watching my videos all day who have no experience with another human being. And I've actually never visited a prostitute in my life, but it's a real experience. At least, you're talking to a human being, you're engaging in life in an act. And so I think you kind of have to, like, one hand giveth and the other taketh away. Like, if we're going to try to if we recognize that pornography is too ubiquitous, it's no longer erotic even, if we recognize that problem, we have to give someone something. We have to say, we want you to have a better life. We're not just taking away your toys, So I think, curtailing pornography and legalizing prostitution would be a way to do that.
I'm just trying to imagine any sort of government official being like, okay, like, we're taking away the porn or making it harder to access porn, but we got all these great prostitutes for you guys. And I think in the end of the day, you're gonna appreciate us doing this.
I feel like I would find. I don't know if
wasn't politically successful.
I feel like I don't know if prostitution is. I don't know if I agree that porn is a substitute for sex. I know there are a lot of people that masturbate to porn and don't have sex.
Right.
But I feel like it has more to do with the. I think we're just getting more segregated, and like I think that like. It could be porn, or they just could be playing like League of Legends, or they could be on TikTok, or they could be at home doing nothing. Like, and
well,
also
they're
I would
definitely
say,
not around other people, which is what we were doing when we were young.
That's the issue, because like it used to be back in the day, and I would speak about this. I'm not even talking
sex was only one of the only things to do.
That and social media existed as a way to augment your real life.
Yeah.
Right. Facebook was to check in at fucking parties and see what was going on. It was never a replacement for like real life hanging. Yeah, you would go to the fucking mall with all your loser fucking friends. You'd walk around, you'd talk to girls, and you'd go to house parties, and you'd see people. And regardless of what people think, when men and women are around each other, or boys and girls are around each other for a long period of time, they're going to start fucking. It always happens. It happens in coworker environments. It happens in schools. It happens in places where it's not supposed to happen, with babysitters and whatever. It happens everywhere. But if you're not around people, you're not fucking. Like, and it won't. If you're never around girls and you're a guy and you work a job with 90% male coworkers and you're out of school or whatever, you're not going to fuck ever. You can take away all the porn in the world, and this guy's going to sit at home playing video games. Like,
well, it's even better than the real thing. So it's
well, I don't know if I'd say that.
No, it is though. Well, I'm referencing the song, of course, but what I'm saying is that it's even better than the real thing in the sense that it's replacing life as opposed to inspiring life. So there are many people, many younger people are suffering from erectile dysfunction.
No shot, I don't believe that. No way.
Absolutely true. I'll show you data
Sure, okay.
afterward, but if you just take my point so we can continue the conversation. So. They're suffering from erectile dysfunction. They're suffering certainly from loneliness. It's because when they're with a real girl, look, it's kind of all knees and elbows when you're. I mean, not for you, of course, but
no,
like,
we all have virginity stories in the back of our head. It's like extremely awkward. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
It's the default way for it to be. Yeah.
Right. It's not going to be what you see in an erotic film or a porn movie or whatever. And you kind of got to get used to that. If you can immediately access like bukkake gangbangs and just insane stuff, then that girl sitting next to you on the bed is just not so hot. The virtual reality is better than reality. That's like where we are. It's even better than the real thing.
I might just be wrong, out of touch. I jerked off, bro. I was at fucking 10 years old on fucking Kazaa, like trying to find crazy fucking porn.
I literally had bukkake gangbang VHS tapes when I was 12 or 13 years old, and it didn't stop me from trying to get some pussy. I'm just saying, I'm not denying that it might have that effect on some people, especially because I was working with such a limited amount of porn that I got bored with it so quickly I had to keep going. Obviously, on Pornhub, you're not going to have that problem.
And I wonder if maybe, and I have to, because it's hard to know, like, are you an outlier in some area or not? But like, yeah, like the first like 4 years that I spent with like, because the first girl I dated in my high school sweetheart, we were together for like 3 or 4 years, I think. Like, no amount of porn could have replaced like how much fun it was exploring with that sexually.
You're preaching to the choir, obviously. Like, I totally agree. I love women, but like, you've got to look at these big, broad trends. Like, that we are not worried about teenage pregnancy. We are worried about people who are 35 and have never and are virgins. We're worried about people not having friends. Either.
Yeah,
We're
but
not
I
even
think
talking about
I understand. But I think
girlfriends.
going back
So
to
like,
my
that's
point,
the trend.
I
mean,
think going back to my point though, again, and I feel like this is another thing that I brought up in the beginning, where I say it's fun to have an enemy like pornography, and then the other issue I feel like is more amorphous. I feel like our issue is that it is so fucking entertaining to be on our homes today. It's a lot to compete with.
Right.
If you want me to go outside, you've got to compete with my video games that I can play that I love. You've got to compete with Netflix. You've got to compete with so many things that I have in my house that are so fucking entertaining to me. And you want me to drive out to a restaurant, buy $15 cocktails, like blah, blah, blah. I don't know if it's a matter of like porn versus pussy, or if it's just that like the screens have just gotten so captivating for us.
In my office in the back house, like I have 4 screens set up, and the other day my power went out, and I felt like I had just been robbed of so much entertainment in that moment, because what I'm left with is either like, oh, I have to go grab one of these books on my bookshelf that I haven't touched in a while and literally light a fucking candle, or maybe I have like a handful of articles saved on my phone that I could get to load.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's pretty dark.
And you go to a restaurant today, and I did this with my kids, so I'm just as fucking guilty of this. I'm not castigating, I'm not, chastising parents for it. But you go into any restaurant today and you look at like every single kid at a table has a fucking iPad. And you'll get these kids that are like 3 years old. And bro, and I watched my son do this, okay? This motherfucker can't even read, okay? He's 4. Basically retarded. And he'll take an iPad, okay? And he's like penetrates like 15 paywalls. He's like buying shit. I'm like, Nathan, how the fuck do you even know how to do this shit? You can't even fucking read the words, but he recognized the symbols. Like, oh my God. And that has to be like fucking wiring kids' brains in insane ways, such that like, and I'm so fucking happy because I'm a child of the internet and I grew up on that shit, but I was still very much in the real world because the internet didn't really exist until like 2007, right? Like it didn't really exist until until like the late 2000s. So I still had a lot of real life experience, and that real life experience is irreplaceable. No amount of video chat or whatever. It's why podcasts today are all like in person, because it's way different than doing it on fucking Zoom. But for a lot of young people, like they don't even have that reference point, Like a lot of their socialization happens in Discord rooms, on Facebook, on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram, and they don't even have the real life experience, that repertoire built up, such that when they do need to do it, they're like virgins to socializing, right?
The sexlessness problem kind of reminds me when we talk about the obesity problem in America, in the sense that like 40% of Americans are overweight, and it's
it's got to be 40% are obese. I bet like 80% are overweight.
Okay, you might be right, obese, but like. And the real problem is that we've created our entire society in such a way that nobody has to walk, nobody has to do anything. The easiest food to get your hands on at any given time is terrible for you. And then when you look at a lot of European cities, they basically demand a lot of physical exercise to just be able to exist in there. Even when I lived in New York City, I was getting so much fucking exercise without trying. Working in this current life that I have, I will get no exercise throughout the day unless I go out of my way to work out. So we've created a society in which sex is cumbersome and doesn't really come about naturally, and to be a healthy, in shape person is going to take a very serious effort. It's
Herculean.
See, I was going to say that, but I never know if I should pronounce the U.
Herculean?
Herculean or
Herculean?
Is it Hercules or Heracles?
I just try to dance around it.
Achilles or
Heraclean.
Achilles. I don't know. There was like 15 different ways to pronounce it. But yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, because you're set up to fail.
Right.
You really are. And we look at kids, like it's funny because as a parent, or as a child, if you remember, like your parents always tell you, like, you are who you hang around, garbage in, garbage out. Like you never, ever, ever would, like, your kid is like, hey dad, I'm gonna go hang out with like all these guys that like smoke weed and cigarettes and do this shit all day, but like trust me, like I'll be like a good kid. I'm like, fuck no, you're not hanging out with those motherfuckers. You're gonna hang out with the kid that goes to Sunday school, because I know that if you hang out with these people long enough, you're gonna fucking turn into that, because that's reality. That doesn't stop when you turn 18. You stick a person who's 30 years old in an environment, like you said, where there is no exercise, there's no walking, we drive everywhere, and the best food available to you is ultra processed, ultra high in carbs, everything. Like, yeah, of course people are gonna get fat. And that's not even, you can't even blame them for it, really, because holy fuck, look at the world we live in,
I agree. But being a parent, you do try to put your children in the best situation.
Yeah, you have to, because that's the only way they're going to succeed.
Right, totally. So shouldn't we do this for the population or the planet? And that's why it's like a leader does need to think of himself as a parent, and you have to think of the Americans as children on some level, and they are.
Mhm.
And I feel like we don't, again, confront these issues of not is it liberal or is it legal or is it free or whatever, but what do we actually want? Like, let's talk about ends here. Do you actually want, you know, 12-year-olds obsessed with pornography, playing video games all day, super fat? Or do you want to kind of, in a way, kind of force them to be free, to kind of say, you got to get outside, bro. You got to
Yeah.
join a T-ball team. I'm sorry, it's mandatory now. Like, on some level, we need to start thinking like this. And Americans are just kind of allergic to this notion.
Because
of thinking in terms
it's
of
like an
national
inherent
priority.
contradiction, like in liberalism, where it's like we really do want people to have the freedom to do whatever they want, but that probably needs to be constrained at least a little bit. Because
Right.
left to unlimited, and like there are some things that like, and you guys are old enough. I don't know if you guys ever went to Europe in 2010s and experienced this, bro. When I went to Europe in 2012, when I was in Poland a lot, this happened, and then 2013 in Germany. When I'm over there and I'm outside, and I smell cigarette smoke, I'm like, holy shit. I'm like sucked back into like being 11 years old at IHOP when you had smoking and non-smoking sections.
Yeah.
I don't know how we did it. I honestly, God, don't know what the fuck we did. But in the United States, we fucking wiped the fuck out of smoking. And I think that was a good thing, you know? I think it was a really I don't know if you were a smoker and you got offended by that, but like,
No.
I think it was good that we got rid of smoking. You don't smell smoke everywhere. You go into restaurants, there's not smoking sections.
But
like,
it would have been bad if we were sending, soldiers into people's homes to steal their Newport cartons,
yeah,
right?
sure. Yeah,
Maybe.
probably. No, I'd say probably. No, I'd say yes, that would be
But
bad.
they went about it in a way in
Yeah.
which people didn't feel like they were being coerced, and it took multiple generations really for this
Exactly.
to
But we
and there's still a
managed to
decent
do it,
amount of
yeah.
people who smoke. You go to a bar on a Friday night, you're going to see a shitload of people smoking, and it's actually kind of weird to be like, oh, so this is an activity that's like almost exclusively for people who view themselves through the lens of being a potential smoker. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was somehow, but the first thing, the very most important thing is we identified that it was a problem and we all agreed we kind of need to do something about it. But it's really hard to get people to recognize today that certain things are problems that we need to do something about. Going back to my example
You
for
can't
vaccines.
get them to take a vaccine. Oh,
yeah,
we
going
went
back
the
to my
same
examples
place.
of
Yeah.
vaccines and masks and everything, the United States, and this was one of the reasons why I was so angry about Trump kind of dragging his feet initially on the COVID stuff. When the United States puts its mind to something, I do see like flashes of like, this is the greatest country in the world, fucking bar none. Because when we are unified on an issue, and regardless of how you feel about Ukraine, the way that we approached that was one of those things where we were unified on it. The United States had a mission and a goal, and we carried through, we followed through in a way that was like, holy fuck. When we put our minds to something in the United States, we can do amazing things. We're mailing out COVID tests to everybody, the vaccine shit, and a lot of people don't like the vaccine shit, the PPE that we eventually started to do when we finally took it seriously. If the United States is unified on something, we have so much potential good power that we can throw at a problem.
Yes.
We just can't fucking agree on what any of the fucking problems are anymore, you know? It's so frustrating. It's so much wasted potential.
I agree. And everything, as you were saying, I mean, everything becomes hyper polarized immediately,
Everything.
where, a mask wearing is like means you're a liberal.
Yeah.
Or something like
You're
that.
like a
It's
bot, you're an
very weird.
NPC. Or like sending rockets to Mars is cool. Oh, you want to send a rocket to Mars because you don't care to fix the environment on Earth and you think we can escape to another planet? No, motherfucker, I think it's cool to land shit on Mars. Fuck you. Yeah, it's so frustrating.
As long as we're on the smoking topic, I just want to throw this out there: is that now in California, you can't buy Newports or you can't buy menthol cigarettes because black people like them too much and they are bad for people. So as a result, they have been essentially banned. And I know multiple people who are like getting cartons of Newports in the mail and shit. And I mean, on one hand, I guess, yeah, banning Newports is going to mean less dead black people, which is good. But at the same time, there is a big part of me that's like, well, if they want to fucking smoke them, who the hell are we to be telling them that they can't?
There's got to be a comic of like a dude, like two people are on the fucking sidewalk and one guy's got like a menthol and another dude's smoking like weed and the cop comes up and he busts a dude smoking a menthol cigarette. Like, holy, like some guy, like Demolition Man sucked from the 80s into today's world. Or like, bro, you're going to get in trouble for that. And the guy's on the fucking, weed. Like, yeah, this guy is maybe, but yeah.
Yeah, I
What
don't
a
know.
world. Yeah.
Is it the government's job to save people from the stuff that they
Themselves?
actually
Themselves.
genuinely want
I
to
think
do?
it is.
It is.
Yeah,
It
it
is.
is. We need sugar taxes because, again, left to our own devices, people are fucking. Bro, like, even I'm fucking. If you put me in my house and I've got nothing to I'll fucking masturbate for 12 hours. I won't fucking do anything if I don't have a job, if I don't got a fucking stream, I don't have shit to do. I'll sit around and I'll jerk off all day and do nothing. And
I'd
it's
like
just
to
like,
see your analytics during that 12-hour period. Like, what's your heart rate like during that? I don't know if I could handle that.
it's probably not even high. It's like, oh,
Could you wear
9
the Whoop
o'clock,
band
like
so we
another
could kind
fucking.
of? I want to know what's going on in your body during that.
But like and it's funny because fuck, everybody knows this, and also simultaneously, everything pretends like it's not true. I'll bully conservatives for a second. Conservatives will do this thing where it's like, fuck college, don't go to school, it's not important, blah, blah, blah. Also, fuck the elites. The elites are rigging the system. And it's like, what do the elites do with all of their fucking kids? They all send them to the best fucking schools. Do you think that Warren Buffett is sending his kids to like a 2-year college to become an electrician or plumber? No, these guys are all going to Ivy League. What was the scandal like fucking 5 years ago where a whole bunch of white people were trying to rig these schools to get their kids into them?
Right.
Because and what do successful people always say when you're successful? You know this. I'm sure we all know this at this point. Surround yourself with successful people, right? You never. What do you say to drug addicts when they get out of rehab? Stop hanging out with your druggy friends. We have to work to create a better environment, because people will only succeed as much as their environment allows them to, except for some truly exceptional individuals. But those guys are exceptional because they are the exception. It's not the norm. If you put people in shitty environments, they're going to be shitty people. It's not even their fault. So yeah, if the government can do fucking anything, it should be to kind of like gently massage and guide us in like a relatively positive direction. And if you want to jerk off or smoke a menthol every now and then, fine, but there should be a bit of friction there, whether it's a fucking credit card for a porn site or whether it's, an extra $20 for a sin tax on cigarettes, but something to kind of like guide you in the right direction.
But just the taxes on the cigarettes clearly wasn't working because they decided to eliminate the
well, the
flavors
problem
out here and
taxes
stuff.
will work. They just got to be higher.
Yeah, they have $20 packs of cigarettes in New York City.
Damn.
I mean,
But they also have legal weed in New York City now too. So.
But you could get a pack of cigarettes for like $4 in a lot of the country,
Sure.
which is pretty unreal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, I remember my grandma used to buy cartons. You remember those? Did you
Yeah.
ever buy cartons?
Oh yeah.
I think it was like 20
Well-
bucks for like for a full, was it like 10
Yeah,
or
yeah,
12?
yeah. They're
whatever?
like $20 because I used to work at the grocery store and steal them and sell them at school.
I remember when my great-grandmother's, I heard about this, of course.
Can you
she
just pull
was,
the mic in a little
Oh,
bit?
I'm sorry. She was quite fond of Coca-Cola in the 1920s. There was something
For
about it.
The
yeah.
Coke, the
Yeah.
Coca-Cola. Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
Blood addiction.
Here's one thing I just wanted to throw out, Richard. How closely are you paying attention to the Manosphere at all? And do you feel like the Manosphere speaks to a lot of the societal ills that we've been discussing? What role does it play?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is addressing something real and offering a very bad solution in general. And I think someone like Andrew Tate is just the full-on expression of this kind of thing. It's addressing the loneliness. I think it's also kind of, it's funny because it's like no Chad ever trained to be a Chad. Like, he might have gotten some avuncular advice here and there, but he just does, he knows like how to go to a woman and make, have that right combination of flattery and a little negativity, tough guy stuff. I'm in control. He knows how to seduce a woman. He doesn't need to be trained. And it's these kind of autistic nerds who like turn it into an actual science, and that they're going to pick up women. I mean, that's always something that struck me as very odd. But no, I don't. I think it goes back to kind of what we were talking about before, is it's just dwelling on extreme negativity about women, thinking of them as all race mixing sluts or
They're taking your
whatever.
advice. They have the enemy. They need the enemy. It's so
True.
adversarial. All the red pill content is so fucking adversarial.
But
Bro,
it's
these
not-
are your
but
other
it's not-
halves, not
but
your
it's
fucking
different.
enemies.
It's not less adversarial than it is almost like masochist and nihilistic. Like I don't know. I've
It
never
feels like
liked the Manosphere.
the one thing that I don't like about a lot of the modern dating shit is it feels like everything is zero sum. If you're winning, she's losing, and you better
Right.
not fucking lose. So like that's like the whole setup on everything, like how to trick girls out of the most pussy possible, how to misrepresent whatever. Like girls want this because they're trying to fucking make you miserable. You got to hold them in check and blah blah blah. And it's like damn. Like you notice that none of the red pill guys, or at least none of the ones that I've seen, they never talk about relationships. It's exclusively about hooking up and sex,
Right.
and then maybe. And when they talk about relationships, talk about how important it is to date like 5 girls at once. But in terms of like, how do you maintain, like, what do you do 6 months into a relationship when like the honeymoon phase is gone? Like, I've never heard a red pillar ever in my life talk about this.
It feels like they have
right?
to get to that eventually, right?
I don't know. Do they? Do any of
No,
them
they
even fucking
don't-
date?
They
Like, I don't
need
know.
to. And their appeal. I mean, like Andrew Tate's audience was incels. I mean, this is the other like grand irony of the situation,
Mhm.
where it's a bunch of people almost using him as like a mascot or spectator sport
Yeah.
about being ultra masculine.
Living
And
and you've got these guys making like 25,000 a year talking about how like, yeah, I'm gonna date 4 women at once because no one woman is gonna hold me down because that's our reproductive strategy. And it's like, bro,
Right.
you're a fucking virgin. What the fuck are you talking
But
about?
when you hear the stories about kids in elementary schools and shit who
Oh,
are
God.
saying terrible things to girls in school because they
Yeah.
listen to too much Andrew Tate, that's when it does get kind of scary. It's like,
For
oh, so
sure.
this shit really is appealing to like little boys.
And a lot of guys, I get women that email me who are like paranoid that like I've had some that have broken up with boyfriends that have gotten obsessed with some of the Andrew Tate stuff. And then I've got women that have emailed me who are like ultra paranoid now, especially black women, that like when they're on dates and shit, they don't know if their significant other is like super bought into like red pill or Tate shit. That like they'll say one thing and all of a sudden they're like, fuck, this
And
guy's
the,
like a
the girls are coming together to like figure out what the red flags are for this guy being an Andrew Tate acolyte or whatever. And like the other day, my girl's assistant went on a date and she told my girl afterwards that the guy on the first date asked her what her body count was.
Jesus.
And I was like, I don't think that was ever a thing my entire life. I think that is 100% the byproduct
Oh,
of this
yeah.
new world we live in. And that's pretty fucking amazing that this guy didn't think that asking that question was going to hurt his chances
Yeah,
of getting laid.
Jesus. Like we had growing up, I think we had like there were sluts and whores, like, oh, this
Yeah.
girl sleeps around.
I
But
definitely
don't know-
wanted to know, but I didn't think that it was my right to ask.
Sure,
when I was in
yeah.
high school.
And I don't think there was quite the obsession with like if you've had more than like 2 dicks in you, you're like undateable.
Yeah.
But I don't. Maybe
No,
it's
and in a lot of
different.
ways, it does remind me of the conversations that I was having when I was like 14 of
Mhm.
like, oh, she's fucked 8 guys, she's a fucking whore or whatever. And that basically is what you hear on a lot of these Manosphere podcasts these days.
yeah, weird obsession with purity as well. Like it's
Yeah.
not that big of a
But
deal.
they can fuck as many people as
well,
they want.
but
Always.
they're not fucking anyone.
I think a lot of them aren't
No, that's the thing about it. They're virgin. Like it's
because the
bizarre.
way that they talk about women sometimes.
they have no earthly idea
Yeah, they
what
say-
it's like.
I've had 2 different red. Pearl did this to me on a show, and fucking Myron and Fresh did me on a show where they're like, I think that actually women like it when you cheat on them because it makes them more competitive. I'm like, what the fuck
no.
are you talking about? There's no way you've ever dated a woman before and you think this shit. I
When
can't
they-
believe it.
When they find out, they drive you up
Yeah.
a tree. They do not like it. But
Or they talk about how like, oh, high value men, like their women understand that their man is going to be with a lot of different women. It's like, what the fuck are you
That's
From my
talking
experience,
about? Like,
that is absurd because I
There's
know
no
plenty
way!
of millionaires and huge stars, and what is the number one thing that's going to cause them to break up or cause friction in their
infidelity and
relationship
shit,
is
yeah.
them
Yes.
cheating. And yeah, maybe you could pull it off if you're dating like a dental technician and you're a fucking massive NBA player or something. She could swallow it up.
If you're digging down,
She's
yeah.
probably not going to want to, and it's probably not going to really be that fun or have like a
and
positive
she'll
effect
get
long term.
revenge on you as well.
Yeah, she'll figure out a way.
Yeah. But I think the interesting thing is where we are is like in many ways what we're experiencing now is a kind of return to nature. So if you talk to Fuentes or something, they would depict monogamy and marriage as like the natural order, and this is there's one man for every woman and all that kind of stuff. That's not the natural order at all. I mean, in terms of nature, most men are not going to reproduce. It's actually going to be 80 to 90% of males that don't reproduce.
No
Really?
shot. I don't think that's true.
80 to 90?
Absolutely.
No way.
Yes way. We can talk about this afterward, but if you just go with
I'm
me in my
intrigued.
argument.
Okay.
So there was this David Attenborough video that I remember seeing of he said something like, what you are about to see is a full-on slaughter bench. And it was this field of bees, and the female bees would come and present themselves for mating. And swarms, hundreds of thousands of bees would descend upon them, and they would get into this massive death orgy where 99% of them would perish fighting to get to the woman. And they don't even know who won in a way because all of the male bees are dead. Now, that's an extreme example, but it's not unlike, deer crashing, rams crashing into each other, etc. We, again, things like antlers and so on, this is all about fighting other men for women. And not everyone gets to have a woman. Only the best do. Most of the male population is not going to reproduce themselves.
Well, but then that
And
would mean most of the female population is not reproducing either. Because
well,
it's not like there's a ton of men that are all having sex with like tons of women.
well,
and-
yeah, but it is like asymmetrical. I mean, if you've ever gone hunting, you don't want to kill a female pheasant, let's say, that's gray. You actually go after the males only. If you're picking crabs out of the ocean, you leave the females there. It's a more valuable resource.
Sure, I understand that, but for humans, it's not like it's normal that like one husband has two wives and then they all have kids together.
It is, though. I mean, in the sense of, in terms of class dynamics, things have been totally reversed. In terms of class dynamics previously, absolutely people were making love with the peasantry and spreading their genes that way. And many peasant men in particular are going
There might have been
infertile.
like some like harems and stuff by like the aristocracy and
I'm
shit,
not
but I think that for
not necessarily talking harems. I'm talking upper classes were outbreeding lower classes, and the upper class, that notion of a prima nocta or something like that, it's a myth, but it's kind of real in the sense that upper people were mating with lower orders and outbreeding the lower orders and replacing them. So what happened? I mean, there's been a lot of studies with this, but like what happened in previous times was downward mobility. So richer, more intelligent, aristocratic people were outbreeding the lower orders. And so they would move down in social status. And that's something we don't think about. We're all like, my grandfather's a coal miner and now I'm going to college or whatever. The difference there would be my grandfather was king and now I'm a farmer or a shop owner. There's downward mobility. So it was a kind of great replacement of sorts that was occurring throughout history. And I think it was probably ultimately beneficial, even if it is cruel and unfair.
You can't just let him dog whistle like that.
with rent replacement.
I mean, somebody's gonna call it out in the comments.
No, I feel like this isn't true, but I don't have the numbers on hand. I feel like
Gregory Clark has written a few books on this. He's looked in terms of surnames.
I just can't believe that 90% of men historically haven't reproduced.
Not, I'm not claiming that. I'm saying in nature.
In nature, for animals and shit, I could
You will
understand that,
have examples of that, and in the human population, you'll have something closer to that. Pure monogamy has never been natural.
Sure, I think that
in the way that we had it in the mid 20th century.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think that humans are unique in that our reproductive realities are a bit different than most mammals in that one, our women are pregnant for a long time,
Right.
and two, our offspring are fucking worthless for like years.
Yes.
Like you see, like baby kittens and shit are walking. I think on is it day one?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, they're walking
definitely.
immediately,
And they could separate from the mother almost.
yeah, and
immediately.
our babies, if you like poke their skull, their fucking brains will cave in when they
Right.
come out of the fucking womb. You
Right.
got to be careful. So I feel like that dynamic biologically kind of necessitated that there had to like you couldn't just fuck like 20 women and then walk away because then the women are gonna die and the kids are gonna die. You had to have men
Yeah,
like
yeah.
taking care of like the women like naturally, otherwise it just wouldn't work.
Oh,
as a
there's no
reproductive thing.
doubt that there's a huge spectrum when it comes to this, and we're way over here. Like the amount you have to put in at least a decade of investment into an offspring.
Yeah.
In nature, that just wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, by a decade they're dead. Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. There's no doubt what you're saying is true. But all I'm saying is, even within that spectrum, like pure monogamy as we had it in the 20th century is not really a thing, globally speaking.
Sure.
Most men, a lot of men are going to lose out on this, and I feel like we've returned to this state of affairs through crazy means. Like in many ways, we've returned to it through feminism in this weird way, which is extremely picky. You know, they're so picky they hate men, you know, kind of thing. But all of that is a kind of shit test or challenge to win them over. Like
I feel like
they're maybe being too picky for their own good, but they are being picky, and that is a kind of natural order of things. So I think through like this postmodern like weird stuff we're going through, there's going to be a selection process for certain people. You know that Chelsea Handler video that I bet you guys saw like a few weeks ago? It wasn't that funny, and it was ultimately just kind of sad, where she's just saying like, I masturbated this morning and now I'm going on a Tinder date and I'm gonna rewatch the Obama biopic or whatever. There's just something deeply sad about it. The fact is, there aren't gonna be more Chelsea Handlers. Like she missed it. She missed the boat. And there are going to be different people are engaging in breeding who made the boat. And so a lot of the alpha types, guys who are completely reckless, knocking up women left and right, etc. Whatever you want to say about them, they are going to survive. Hyper religious, Christian people, like they are going to have a future. Rich people who maybe want a trophy wife and 2 trophy kids, whatever you want to say about it, they're going to have a future. So I think we're in this bottleneck of reproduction, and we're hearing this like screams from the people who are getting left behind. And it's the incel, community. It's the people attracted to Andrew Tate and the Manosphere. It's the people shooting up a massage parlor. Like there's a lot of pain going on because we are in a really intense bottleneck right now.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if I'm gonna go down a whole fucking 2 hours of red pill conversations. I guess my broadest sense, I feel like this is something I've talked about a lot because I've done a lot of red pill content lately. I feel like there are two really unique things that are happening right now for women. One is they have control over their reproduction, so they have access to sex without it being a permanent affair.
Right.
And two, they're actually making money now, a lot of money. So they don't need a man for a paycheck. I think something that's been really challenging for men is women have done a really good job at being feminine, getting feminine, learning all that shit in the household, but now they've grown up and they've assumed all of the traditionally masculine roles as well. And the value proposition that the average man now has for a woman is under threat. Because
Right.
before it was like, I earn money. Do you want to get married? Because you're not going to earn any money. And if you want to have a family or do anything in life, you basically need to be attached to me because I have a paycheck. And now when a woman has a paycheck, like, what is the value proposition from an average man, right? She can fuck. It's not hard to get sex. And she can do it without even getting pregnant. So she doesn't need you to be
Right.
married to her for sex. And she's working. So, like, if you have an average job, like, you need more than that. And I think men have had a really hard time catching up in that women have grown and evolved, whether you can blame affirmative action or pushing them or whatever. But the reality is that women have evolved so much. And I think men are still kind of stuck in this, like, 60s, 70s
Women
mindset
are more
where it's like,
tuned to the world. Like men's fashions might take like a decade or two to change. Women's fashions will change in like 2 weeks.
sure. And we're finding out that women
they're
are.
more tuned. They can kind of evolve more.
But it's a hard push to get like, because how do you encourage men to like level up to the same amount? Because like truly men, it even sounds gay to say it, even when I say it, like men need to grapple with like the feminine side of like being able to have good conversations, being emotionally responsive and intelligent, being able to provide like a good sounding board for one. Like these are the things that a lot of women like truly value in relationships. But when you go online, what's the dating advice? Be more masculine, be more threatening. And it's like, bro, that's gonna work for like 1% of the ultra masculine guys.
Right.
But like it's not like the average guy is like not masculine enough to pick up a woman. Like a woman can go and fuck it. Like if she wants to fuck an alpha dog, she can get on Tinder and do that. And I feel like we have a really hard time right now getting men to catch up. Also because it's just not politically popular or viable to talk about helping men because fuck men that's like what society says, right? So when women will start to out earn men. They will do it because they're killing us in college.
They're doing it right
in
now.
some communities, they're
Yeah.
starting to. They're killing us in college. And the idea, I've had school faculty.
Postmodern work is more suited to them.
Because a lot of it is
multitasking, all the office
and
stuff is
service
better,
work and like communicating with humans and stuff.
Right,
I think men can do it, but we're just not socially conditioned to do it.
But-
like traditionally, we thought that women can't do math. They're not going to succeed in school. They're not going to do these things. But as soon as we like cater we don't even change the environment. We just like cater to women a little bit more. Now we find out, well, fuck, maybe women are actually better at school than men. Like if you went to school, I don't know if you guys ever had this, but if you're asking somebody for notes, bro, if you ask a guy for notes, you're getting some fucking like schizoid Jeffrey Dahmer, like I can't fucking read this shit. And then you ask girls and it's like, oh yeah, and you've got like bookmarked sections with like the highlighters.
I remember having that experience constantly in school, just like looking at the girl next to me's homework and just being like, oh, this was a lot easier for you to like organize your thoughts and to really smooth out this whole process. Whereas for me to even sit down for an hour and work on my schoolwork is like pulling.
I want to
fucking
kill
teeth.
myself.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm actually I was really good at math in high school. I did a lot of calculus, and even I cried in grade school. I don't want to sit and do 30 fucking hours of math homework because it's boring to me. Whereas women have like no problem. Like they're like, oh yeah, I'll do. That's just because I think the temperament is a little different. But regardless, what I'm saying is that like we've learned this. Women are growing and evolving and changing in all these ways, and we kind of like left men behind. We're not like helping men like figure it out. It's politically unpopular to talk about it, and the only people giving advice, in my opinion, are giving dog shit advice to do it. And it's like a fuck you world. Yeah.
It's absolutely true. I think this might be changing a little bit. I've heard of even like so-called redshirting boys, putting them in lower school a lot later. So putting them at lower school in like age 7, like in kindergarten, age 7, just because we do have different. I mean, again, it's like politically incorrect to say that men and women have different brains, but like there's just a different evolution, kind of later blooming. The fact that this is being talked about in mainstream is pretty good, but I think it's also kind of a band-aid on the bigger problem of like being a lumberjack dude there are jobs like that. There are jobs like that where I live, no doubt.
But it's
But
largely a
it's
vestige of the past.
exactly, and
And
it's not
you don't have a
valued.
value. Yeah, why does a woman? I don't need a lumberjack. I
Yeah,
work at fucking H&R Block. Like I make money.
right.
Yeah, and I have this. And then like these red pill guys come like, don't you want somebody to protect you? It's like I can call the fucking
There's
cops.
very little to be protected from
Yeah,
these
and what
days.
is the
Yeah.
biggest
Right.
threat to a woman in the household? It's a fucking
Yeah,
intimate
the
partner.
lover, yeah.
Man.
Yeah, it's like Jesus, you gotta have more than that, bro. Yeah, but it's hard. But again, like I said, you even sound gay saying it, like being more emotional. And it's like, no, women don't want that. They want a guy that's, again, if you can hit the top 1% in masculinity, the value proposition is there. If you're a shredded fucking bodybuilder who's like charismatic and you're earning, 6-figure salary, then sure, you could do it. But for 99% of your audience, you're getting left in the fucking dust. They're not gonna do that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That advice is horrible. Yeah, no doubt. You don't
Mhm.
acting like Andrew Tate and you're a schlub.
Only
it's gonna
works if
be
you're
a
Andrew Tate.
catastrophe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think again, it's just that bigger issue of like how do we construct a world where that type of man is going to be valued, because we're going to have whether we like it or not, we're going to have those types of men, and I do want to value them.
Mhm.
I think there's something like I might not even be their best friend or something, but I like the fact that they're like dudes who are cool and manly and drink beer and
Yeah,
watch
it's cool.
football.
Yeah,
Like,
sure. Yeah.
I like it. I think
Mhm.
we need that. And so it's kind of like, what can we do for them?
Mhm.
That obviously stop demeaning them, but like what can we do economically and socially for them? I think it's a huge question.
Have you seen the fucking God? There's some woman on Twitter. I think she's on TikTok, but I see it blowing up on Twitter where she's putting out videos of her being like traditionally feminine, like taking care of the houses, and progressives are fucking losing their mind,
Yeah.
like calling this woman like all sorts of like
The
you're a
trad
pu-
mom.
Yeah,
trend,
yeah, like you're enforcing hierarchies and oppressive traditional gender roles. Like, bro,
I keep bringing up
I
the.
kind of hate those too, though, because it's like the ultimate pick me kind of thing.
it is, but
You
fuck,
know?
I mean, if people want to do what they want to do, let them
I
do what they want to
agree,
do.
but
Like,
it's like using your life. It's like you're not contributing something to the conversation. You are a mascot for something.
I mean,
don't
it's just
know.
the
It
other
kinda-
end of the girl who's like, I don't ever shave my armpits, and I think guys should accept me even if I'm an asshole.
I keep
I'm
bringing
all
up the trad mom identity to different like OnlyFans girls and stuff, and
Mhm.
I am kind of surprised by how positive the reaction I get to it is. And usually it's either, yeah, I could imagine myself being on that kind of level in a few years, or I can imagine myself doing that right now, or I'm just making too much money right now, but at some point I could see myself just wanting to settle down and be a mom. And I think if anything, the experience of being this social media OnlyFans creator is probably like really showing women that this is not forever, and that there's
Right.
probably a version of domestication that you would rather be a part of.
Sure.
Hmm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Well, we just ran out of things to say, huh?
I mean, I'm pretty sure we could keep this going for like 8 hours if you wanted, but
No, I mean, is there anything pressing that kind of stands out to you that we
Actually-
might want to touch on?
could I do this?
Sure.
I need to take a quick bathroom break.
Great idea. Yeah, we
And
could sort of
yeah,
reconvene,
maybe,
yeah.
but I'll come back with some
Okay.
amazing stuff.
Okay, we're back from our obligatory urinary break. Anything else that we should? You had time to think, I guess, while you were urinating. Anything else?
God. Can we talk about God?
Heard about him? Yeah,
Yeah.
not a big fan.
I'm
Not
seeing
a
the
big
blue hair.
fan.
I'm thinking he's not so popular on this
Yeah,
side of the
true.
table. Yeah. What do you think about God in this day and age?
Well,
As an Apolloist,
right.
is that
Yeah.
how we say it?
Apolloist is what
Okay.
we're going with. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the death of God is something that's extremely important, and I think relates to almost everything that we've talked about. So when Nietzsche announced God is dead, he doesn't say that himself. He kind of puts it in the mouth of this madman who's holding up a lantern in the middle of the day, and everyone's ignoring him or laughing at him, and he's in a way kind of gone crazy. There's another point in Zarathustra. He says, Zarathustra says, I can't believe they don't know that God is dead. So I mean, even in the 19th century, it was a assumed fact that the Judeo-Christian God doesn't work anymore. And I think we've kind of just been living in the wake of that. I think, in Europe, you'll have societies that are majority atheist at this point, which is really remarkable. And I think genuinely hasn't happened before. America, we're kind of behind that for some interesting historical reasons. But yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by what this actually means for the world and society, and whether we can really have a society where we don't have a connection to the transcendent and so on. So I mean, I think some of the impulse behind what Mark Brahman and I are doing is to understand the problems of Abrahamic religions, understand why they're failing, and then attempt to see what has worked, like what has been able to generate civilization, higher civilization, what is life affirming and not life denying, where can we have a sensual existence within that frame. But I think it is under the presumption that religion is necessary. I mean, we're not Homo sapiens. I mean, we're like Homo religiosus. Like we need some kind of connection to something, and without it, there's despair or there's just branching off into total insanity. And so I think so much of contemporary postmodern world is grasping for something. It's Marianne Williamson, it's the Trump, like literally, it's hyper fundamentalism, it's Eastern religion, but it's all this grasping for need of being a part of something bigger than yourself. So I don't know. I mean, these are just some basic things to throw out there. I don't know what you guys think.
Am I supposed to have a response to that?
I mean,
I feel like, I guess I take a little bit of an existential approach to this, in that like, I agree that we need meaning from somewhere. I feel like we can invent that meaning, and then we can live for that meaning without it being necessarily theological in nature. I know that historically we've spent a lot of time. God is a very easy kind of like blueprint to, this is what I live for, this is how I structure my family, this is where my morals come from.
Right.
I feel like people are capable of aspiring to more, that we can find meaning in the things that we enjoy, the people around us, the hobbies that we do.
Hobbies?
Yeah, hobbies.
Well, I mean, in comparison to something that's divine, I mean,
I get more meaning out of some of the most transcendental events I've ever done in my entire life, more than the best sex, more than the coolest mass I went to as a Catholic, has actually been in a room with friends improvising for hours on keyboard while they're playing other instruments. These are some of the most connected I feel to other people and to my humanity. That we've got like a language that we've invented for art that is hitting our ears in a new way, and we're creating something together. And that feeling, and if you're a musician, you've done it, you know it. The feeling of jamming out with people, the feeling of improvising, creating something new and doing that is such a connected experience. It's so cool. Hobbies can be like a lame thing, like I play League of Legends, or hobbies can be like really fun things that you pour your heart and your soul into. Like artists, like all the great artists of the Da Vinci's and the musicians that we've talked about here. Your Nirvanas, your punk, all of this. Like these people, these are hobbies. I guess maybe hobby is like maybe art should be a better way to refer to it. But like, yeah, I think that we should be able to find things in our life that give us meaning and purpose, and then pour time into those things, and then find a way to share those things with other people. Personally, that's where I find the most meaning in my life. That could take the form of music. It could take the form of intellectual or philosophical discussions. But I think that having these things that we pour time into, that we can use to connect to others, for me is like the ultimate human experience.
I resonate with so much of what you just said, but I mean, isn't that a part of religion? I mean, a religion isn't just coming up with some like abstract proof that God exists.
No, I agree.
A
That
religion
it's
is
not
singing
Aquinas'
it's
arguments
singing in
for
a choir.
God. Yeah, I agree. A
Yeah.
religion is a really good. That's why I said religion is a good blueprint for that. I think that people have thrown away the blueprint and they didn't make anything else. So you get a lot of people that are kind of like wandering in this spiritual void because we didn't make anything to replace church. We just like got rid of the theology and the religion, and we didn't keep all of the rituals, which I think is a problem for atheists or agnostics or just non-spiritual, non-religious, non-practicing people in general. But I think it can be found. I think you can find meaning in your life. You can find ways to structure your life without religion, but we need to create a new guidebook or have people intentionally and deliberately meditate on that process, because you're not going to find it without thinking about it. But you could in the past with religion, because you didn't have to think about it because you were born into a religion, and then all the meaning and purposes kind of like preconceived and constructed for you. But without that, you have to spend some deliberate time searching, and most people just are never really trained or taught how to do that.
It's too much to ask for humanity to come up with the right solution all on their own as well. I mean, there has to be some kind of guiding structure to lead them there. And
It
I
could
think
be.
that's what religion is about. Because I mean, religion
There's
is
so much
about
baggage.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's this famous phrase that I'm sure you heard as an atheist from I think it was a German Jewish historian or something, but it was like um, religious people say that they can turn a bad person good,
Mhm.
but it's actually true that religion can make a good person do bad things.
Mhm.
It's like, how else could you inspire someone to torture a witch or invade, the evil heathens across the border or something without
I
that?
feel like there's like a Hitchens quote where it's like good people will do good things, bad people will do bad things, but for a good person to do bad things, it takes religion or something. I think
Right.
it's
I
like
bet
a,
he
yeah,
was paraphrasing the same
probably, yeah.
idea. But isn't there a lesson in there? Because we need people to do bad things. And if we don't do the bad things, then other people are going to do the bad things.
Dude, I
to
feel like you
us.
really need a villain in society. Is what you feel like you're telling me. I just super reject. I hope we don't need to. Maybe I'm idealistic.
Well,
but like,
I definitely think it seems clear from listening to him. It's useful. It's just
Yeah, because
should
you
we
can-
then create one?
yeah, and I understand that, like the need for having, like, imagine watching like what would a movie be without an antagonist, right?
Mm.
Like,
Right.
can that exist? I would like to think so. For
Oh, goodness.
What if you just had no one to beef with for 6 months on
Right.
stream? Sounds like a pretty boring 6 months,
Yeah.
right?
This is what I like.
James Bond
Okay,
didn't have a villain. He's just basically drinking.
Sure.
Just walking around
martinis.
looking cool. Yeah.
I wish that we could just manage conflict in a better way. I personally, I manage conflict very well. I can go very hard on someone, and at the end, we're chill and cool. But it feels like people just lack the ability to do that. And having the
seeing
actual,
you be so comfortable having conversations with people like Fuentes or whoever is
Mhm.
why I feel comfortable having a conversation with Richard. Whereas before, I felt like I had been kind of bamboozled into thinking like, oh, people have dangerous ideas and you can't platform
Right.
people or whatever, which seems
Mhm.
kind of stupid. Having spent like the last year or so watching you go to war with all kinds of people that you disagree with on things and finding common ground with them.
yeah, there's these 5 little things that I figured out like politically that remain consistent throughout my life, and one of those things is you have to assume, and if these are like, if you don't start from these positions, you're lost. The number one assumption that you make is all people are fundamentally trying to do the best thing. That's if you start from a foundation of like that guy's fucking evil, then you're lost. Like in America, conservatives want America to be the best version it can be. And I think progressives do too, and communists and Nazis and everything. They think they're doing the best. And when you start from there, you can start to talk to people for real. But if you start from a position of he just wants to fucking ruin the country, well, how the fuck are you gonna have a conversation? Why would you even want to have a conversation? You know,
Right.
it's kind of like I say that like January 6th is a good thing if you really believe the election was stolen, right? You should be out there protesting and trying to fight back, or like killing abortion doctors is good if you really believe that abortion is murdering an infant, right? But the problem is that like the reason why we disagree on this is because there's some foundational difference of like, what epistemically even is true, what is a fact, what is not. But yeah, you have to start from that foundation that everybody is good and they're trying to do the right thing. Because if you start any other place, yeah, you're not going to talk to anybody, and society necessarily fucking falls apart.
Yeah, I completely agree. But again, religion can bring people together in that sense. As I was saying, like religion is consensual force, as contradictory as that seems. It's a way of hurting and giving people a high and a low and a left and a right that they immediately understand. And I don't think humans can function without such a structure, and we will find a structure in some way if it's not given us through a value system. And so it raises, a bigger question of what kind of value system you want. And I think Christianity gets a lot of credit in a way because of leftist or feminist or just degeneration of society and the things of, this is wholesome and real, it's about families and so on. And I get that, and I think it has kind of glommed onto that. But there's the bigger question of what it actually means to be a Christian. What does it really mean for that figure from the Old Testament, Yahweh, to be the chief God who you fear? What does it really mean to worship a dying God on a cross?
Well,
In
like
the ancient world, Christians were accused of being atheist in a way. By Celsius, they had gotten away from the deities that spoke to people immediately, represented their tribe, or represented higher values or primordial principles. They were kind of worshiping some kind of, on some level, some abstract thing or a dying God, which is
This is-
impossible in the mind of the ancient world.
this is
So you have to interrogate, like, what is Christianity? What kind of system is it leading you towards?
this is what I like about Christianity, I guess, is that like I can find a way in Christianity to make it compatible with your incessant need for a villain in a way that I think is healthy. If you're not going to read the Bible, at least read one of the Gospels, because I feel like 93% of what happens in the Gospels, people should generally be on board with. Be nice to people, don't judge people, treat your neighbor well. Like, it's pretty basic shit. I don't think Jesus is out there saying some shit like, John chapter 7, verse 42, we need to abolish the Federal Reserve for Bitcoin. Okay, he's not talking about a bunch of like really controversial shit. Most of it is like pretty reasonable. The thing that I like about the framing of Christianity in terms
Comes
of the
with a
villain
sword.
is what?
I mean, Jesus, I respect maybe Jesus more than you do. I think Jesus was kind of beyond good and evil in a weird
Well,
way.
but the evil that they talk
he
about.
comes with a sword. He comes to divide you. He comes to divide you from your own parents, he says.
No, well, hold on. Only if the parents stand in opposition to God, though, right? But
Well,
real quick,
okay,
let me just
but-
finish a real quick thing.
Okay.
Is I think that for Christianity, the evil, Satan, is a metaphorical idea that's represented in terms of the division that exists within us. That the enemy or the adversary we seek to vanquish is the thing inside of us that alienates us from our idealized form, which is God, right? The idea that like a sinless person who is capable of respecting their neighbors, their parents, and living a good and chaste life, the evil villain that we're constantly fighting against is sin, or the representation of that is Satan. We don't actually need like other people as enemies for that to be like the thing that we have to fight against, right? Like the antagonist can exist within inside of us, which I think is a healthier way to view antagonists than like needing another nation, Oceania, or a race or whatever, another person as like an enemy.
Well, I think you're giving a rather euphemistic notion of all these things. I mean, look, you're born in sin, and there is some profound thing that was brought into the world through Judaism of hating the body, in the sense of just the body itself is a problem. Sensuality itself is a problem. I mean, you're a sinner whether you like it or not. There's an attack on things that are physical and beautiful and manifest in the world.
Which is
It's also a religion that, at least in the Christian form, debatable with Judaism, but it is offering your best life later on. It's offering an afterlife that you will experience these kinds of things. I think there are actually some really negative effects.
I think that the attack on the body, I think, is fundamentally good. And I think in a hidden way, all three of us kind of agreed with it earlier. Left to its own devices, the body will get fat, smoke cigarettes, jerk off to porn. Like, we are in a constant struggle with ourselves to guide ourselves on a good path. That if we were to be more religious in our earlier arguments, we would be talking about like the desire for the body to sin. And it does naturally exist in us. And so in such a high state that we will, given the opportunity to download and masturbate to the craziest porns, gamble, do all these horrible things, we have to keep the mind pure.
But you're projecting something onto Christianity, because Christianity isn't an attack on the dying body or the degenerating body. I mean, that's Christ. That's what is imaged in a God on a cross. It's an attack on a healthy, powerful body.
I don't agree. I disagree.
Mean, you can euphemize this, but I mean, you can kind of come up with a Christianity that's more positive. And I would agree that for so many people, like, their image of Jesus is I guess a smiling, bearded white guy with brown hair, going around. They instinctively want something healthy about it. But what its ultimate message is something that you can kind of get to. And I do think that message is conveyed in all forms of Christianity. You're still worshiping this God that is failing and dying and returning again and again. You're worshiping suffering. You're claiming that the body is inherently wicked. I agree that we can miss the mark, which is the Greek word for sin, missing the mark. But I would certainly not think that I am inherently awful or something. I think I can maybe give a glimpse to maybe if I'm good enough in my life, I can offer a kind of glimpse of like a higher being or a God.
I guess it depends on the way that you want to frame it. Like, I feel like unchecked, humans can be selfish and dangerous and destructive creatures.
Sure.
But given the mind to pursue something greater than yourself, which is what people would point to as like the Jesus or the godliness in you or whatever, those are the things that you push towards that create a better you, a better community, and a better world. That even when you talk before about like sensuality is like dangerous or bad, I don't think the Bible ever says that sensuality is bad or dangerous. It's just something that ought to be reserved for your wife. And I think we can all think of examples of single parents, of rapists, of horrible people that have that gift of sensuality in the body that misuse it and appropriate it in such a way that it becomes, the body itself becomes destructive to society when you pursue the sensuality for the sake of sensuality to that end. But when instead you channel it in a more positive, Christ-like way, in a way where you're only using it as a tool to build a family or to strengthen the bond between father and mother, husband and wife, that it becomes like a more positively channeled thing, a more divine thing.
Okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think again, you're projecting things.
What am I projecting? I
onto
feel
the
like I learned
Bible
this
that
shit in
aren't
school.
there.
Wait, what is this not?
In Catholic school, you probably learned that because again, it's like this is this way that we can square the circle. But what is Jesus actually saying? What is the meaning of all of these things ultimately? I mean, what is the Tower of Babel about but an attack on civilization? Babel is
I thought the Tower
Babylon.
of Babel was an attack on the hubris of man to think that he could accomplish great things with the absence of God.
We can accomplish great things, but it's never hubris is never mentioned. The worry that Yahweh has and why he goes down and destroys the tower is that people will be speaking the same language and thus communicating and reaching up higher to the heavens. It's not they didn't it wasn't hubris that was their downfall. Like they built a tower too high and it fell over. It was the very fact that they were doing something in a civilized manner that Yahweh came down to smite it. So there are some, and Babylon is the origin of the word Babel. Talking Babel. It's also a direct reference to Babylon, which is a great ancient civilization.
To be
that
clear,
the
also,
Jewish people resented.
I am an atheist, so I'm not gonna say I support the God shit. Like,
Well, I know,
but I'm just saying that I
are
think
you
there
an
is a way.
atheist?
What?
But like it's a kind of like you need to recognize like there's a darker element to all of these Abrahamic religions.
I mean,
And
I think there
it's
can be, but there. I mean, it can be channeled in a positive way too. I just did it. I think that like there are positive, and I think if you go to mass, if you go to church, if you listen to your preacher, or whatever, they can channel in positive ways too. There can be like dark ways to interpret it as well.
Right.
I remember I got into an argument with a religious guy over should we fixate more on people going to hell, or like the afterlife shit versus stuff that exists in the world now, because some people think that it's a good motivator to tell people that you're going to burn eternally in the fires of hell. I think that's a really shitty way to sell religion. But
Right.
yeah, I guess I don't feel like Christianity has to. I met some Christians. It's not like an intrinsically bad, horrible, evil thing. It's more just like a moderating force or principle, like a guiding force of like
Right.
maybe
No,
be careful.
I even attend church in a kind of social way because I
Mm-hmm.
guess I am hopefully pro-social, and I do think that there are some civilized aspects to my church and the Episcopalian Church and so on, but I also recognize that we need to move beyond these kinds of messages, and that particularly when like all around us we're experiencing the death of God, just the lack of church going, the lack of real belief in a deity, some kind of either hyper personal or hyper abstract notion of God as opposed to the figure himself, Yahweh. I think this is spelling the end of this era, and there does need to be something put forward. And Apollo is also son of God. He's a god of intelligence, of sensuality, of sending plagues to your enemies if you need to, of athleticism. He's kind of a polymath and the best at everything. He's beautiful, fundamentally. And
Wait, what's the difference between what you just described in Yahweh?
Yahweh's a fire god who's gonna kill you and terrorize you.
I feel like he mellows
Yahweh-
out a lot after Jesus. I feel like he's
Well,
more
that's
mellowed
not
out.
Yahweh. That's Theos in the Gospels.
Well,
But-
in the Christianity, they're all the same God, right?
Right, they translate it as God. Yeah,
Sure.
it's different words in the Bibles.
Mm.
Well, but it's still fundamentally it's the same God. The God of the Old Testament is the same God as the New Testament. There might be different words referred to him, but it's fundamentally it's the same.
Is it
spiritually,
the
it's
same
thing.
personage who is destroying, villages and acting out of jealousy and so on? That kind of abstract theos of the New Testament. I mean, I agree with you. It's meant to be the same thing, but it's a different kind of coloring, and it is a different word. It's a Greek word, obviously, in the Gospels. It's either going to be Elohim, which is plural, interestingly, or Yahweh.
Were the Gospels
itself.
originally written in Greek?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
not Arabic or whatever. Or
No,
J-
they're
or-
written in Koine Greek.
what was the
yes.
Jewish fucking old shit?
Well, Hebrew, and
Hebrew,
there was
yeah.
some Aramaic in the Old Testament as well. Yeah.
Okay, Aramaic, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, but mostly Hebrew. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So the Greek and the Jewish Bible is translated around 250 BC into Greek. That was kind of almost the debutante a party for Judaism in a way, is when it was presented to the Greek Gentile world.
Wait, so do you believe in Apollo as like a real actual god, or is this just like a euphemistic figure that you use to like
Well,
make sense of the world?
this is the thing. It's like I feel like after Christianity, we're so invested in the notion of historicity. Like Jesus had to exist. He had to walk around, multiplying loaves, raising people from the dead, and dying on a cross.
Mhm.
Fact is, all of those things are deeply mythical in their essence. I don't think Jesus. I'm sure there was some guy named Josh who was a preacher around 33 AD or something like that. But no, I don't think there's any historicity to the Bible. I don't think there's any historicity whatsoever to the Old Testament. I think it's all literature and myth.
I
And
think for the Old Testament, I think that's true. Like, I don't think there's a single archaeological record of like any Jews in Egypt, for instance, at all.
No.
Like that, all of that is totally.
No, and
historical.
whether there was a Jerusalem, I mean, it might have been a few olive groves with some badass named David who was a legendary footballer or something.
Sure.
Like the notion, all of that history is myth, but that doesn't mean it's bad or you should reject it. You should kind of embrace it. Like, did an ancient person believe in Zeus?
Mhm.
And they were like, they talked to Zeus every night, and it's a different mentality. I think Christianity, it's both hyper abstract but then hyper historical. Like you're invested in this real story. Actually, a priest that my priest, I guess, is an Episcopalian. He mentioned this last Easter. He was like, "Listen, I know you love the Easter eggs and the Easter bunny. It's all funny. It's all fun and games, but it's not a metaphor. If you are a Christian, you have to believe that he rose again, and so on." And I respect him for that, even though I don't disagree with him. I respect him because he's taking it seriously.
As a Catholic, we believe in transubstantiation.
Oh my
meaning
God.
that when they say the prayers to do the blood and body of Christ, that the Eucharist, the unleavened bread, is actually biologically transforms into the flesh of Jesus, and the wine actually biologically transforms into the blood of Christ.
Right.
Like, yeah.
And so you're endlessly sacrificing him. The sacrifice was completed on the cross. Yet Catholics are rehearsing it over and over again. It's like never letting Jesus rest. I've always thought there was something really
that's part of,
profoundly
but that was
sick
part of
about
the
it.
deal that. This is a very weird theory because I hate all this stupid shit. But like that was like part of the deal that like God made. Well, because I feel like I'm arguing fucking on like who's got a higher power level, like fucking Snape and Harry Potter, or like Goku and Dragon Ball Z or some shit. But like I think the idea was supposed to be that Jesus came down and he suffered and he killed the part of him that cringes. He got rid of the impure human part. He he rose again to become this symbol of like sacrifice, and we celebrate that because it showed that God was willing to send down a representative to help make us understand that we can destroy the parts of ourselves that are evil and sinful and aspire to something greater and more divine.
Okay,
And we celebrate that sacrifice over and over again, but it's not like he's eternally suffering, right? Like he had to suffer like a human in order to show us what he wanted to show us. But, like
Right.
God is happy to do it. He's fucking God. If he didn't want to, he could just make it stop. If you believe in that shit, I imagine,
Right. God, why hath thou forsaken me? I mean, it's a really powerful moment.
Mhm.
Okay, so you were born and said, and you were deserving of hellfire, and Yahweh should destroy you and torture you for eternity.
Mhm.
However, he was willing to sacrifice his son or himself in a Trinitarian way in order to let you off the hook, as it were. So it's not about inspiring you to be a better person, I guess, kind of, but it's you're deserving of hellfire. Like, and it
Yeah, I
needs
feel like
to
you
be
just take the
atoned
most
for.
negative reading of this ever. Like, yeah, like
But
without
that's what it
God,
is.
but the idea, if you're religious, is that without God, you're just a fucking human. Who the fuck cares? You're another animal, like we said earlier. But there's something specially unique about humans that we're not just another animal. We're created in the image of God. That He hand sculpted us in His image. And
Right.
the idea of the sacrifice of Jesus and being born in sin is that your body, left to its own devices, will be wandering the jungle like another animal. But God has empowered you that inside every single human, there is that shard, there is that reflection of God, that reflection of Jesus, of God turned man, that if you aspire to follow His teachings and follow what He's told you to do through the Ten Commandments and everything else, that you can be that godly person. That was like the point of it.
Right. That's a very nice way of treating it, but it's not actual Christianity.
Damn, you feel
The ability to also manipulate someone through that notion of an eternal soul.
Mhm.
The ability to say, if you don't do exactly what I want, you're going to burn in hell. That's a really remarkable thing. That actually goes back to Zoroaster and certainly Plato. But anyway, I don't want to get too academic here. But I guess what I'm saying is that like you can experience being a god by achieving something in the real world. Like whenever you lust after a woman, you're kind of experiencing what it means to be Venus on some level. You're experiencing that primordial love. When you succeed at athletics or really any endeavor, you're kind of like Apollo. You're experiencing something like that. So with paganism, it was a what's called paganism. It's funny that paganism just means like peasant or whatever, rural person. But what you're experiencing, that ancient religion is just a fundamentally different concept. You didn't have to believe that there was an actual Zeus or Apollo. I don't think anyone did. It was more of this, because people say like you're inventing a new religion, no one actually believes in it, you don't believe it in yourself. No, it's about kind of like fundamentally reorienting our worldview, where we're not falling into the Christian trap of fearing hellfire and damnation and needing to sacrifice something to end all sacrifice and all that kind of stuff. We're not thinking about an afterlife, that's where we exist. It's like we're thinking we need to build the Tower of Babel right here. Like right here where we live right now. That we should build out of brick a great civilization. So
I mean,
it's
I don't necessarily
ultimately
disagree with you.
life
Yeah,
affirming.
I feel like you can shade Christianity to have these same views while still being Christian. And I'm sure some Christians would agree and some would disagree, but sure.
Yeah. No, I think Christianity has been kind of shaded in that way, as you say, but I don't think it can really escape itself. And once we become conscious of it, it's kind of like an unending road towards where we are now.
Mhm.
I mean, it's like once you see behind Christianity what it's really saying, the kind of symbolism that it's using, and so on, you can't just like do a gloss over it and think that Jesus was Superman or something like that. Which I think a lot of people want to do.
Okay.
I guess it's kind of hard to argue with an atheist because I'm trying to peg you as a Christian.
Yeah, I
to
don't
get
really.
a little resistance
I'm
going.
trying to peg him too. But yeah, it's interesting hearing you say like, oh yeah, nothing in the Old Testament actually happened. For me, as like a 14-year-old realizing I was an atheist, I pretty much stopped there. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's all I really need to know to feel like everything I was taught as a kid was a lie.
I feel like
Yeah.
when you start to become critical, it's very hard, depending on how critical you get, to maintain any type of Christianity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
generally.
Well,
speaking.
that faith is very difficult. It's you can kind of understand Christianity, but that
Mhm.
faith, it's very.
And then
hard.
you end up making a lot of what Richard said. You make a lot of compromises where it's like, well, the Jews escaping are kind of a euphemism, or this is like allegorical, this is metaphorical. Like you basically need like an English degree to reinterpret your Christian
Right.
religion
And
to kind of like make it work.
when
you know?
when you when you debate with like real lifelong hardcore Christians, it's like you face a level of stubbornness that you're pretty unlikely to face when it comes to a lot of other conversations. I don't know if you felt that at all with
Yeah, of
our
course.
last debate or whatever, but yeah.
But there's also to be fair, that's a lifetime buy-in.
Mm.
Like, am I really about to debate you out of the fundamental assumptions that you've made about human existence?
Yeah,
That's
right.
probably not going to happen. That'd be like me arguing with you right now. I'm going to convince you that you really live in the Matrix. Like, am I really
Right.
about to undermine your whole existence? Like, it's not going to happen no matter what. You know?
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, no, I agree, and I think there was almost painful. I can remember not believing in Santa Claus anymore when I was like 9 or something like
Mhm.
that. And it just being kind of painful to let that go, because I think you want to be a part of society. Like you want to play along. You want it to be true. And and as you get older, you kind of have a certain appreciation for Santa Claus.
Mhm.
I'm not going to go and tell my kids like, take the red pill. Alex, Santa is not real.
But
or
I have
something.
I know
You
some
wanna play
parents
along.
who basically are still like doing everything possible to keep the Santa delusion going well into their kids, elementary school career and stuff, because
Right.
their kid asks them a question like, how can Santa deliver to all these houses? And they have to come up with some fucking answer that'll kind of convince their kid. And I'm not entirely convinced that this is not going to have any repercussions, because
I was the exact opposite. When I was
Really?
like 5, I was like, Santa's some bullshit.
Okay,
I don't
yeah.
ever. This is my thought process. Okay, when my kid asks me any question about anything ever, I will always give you the real explanation.
Right.
Now it's going to be varying levels of
You
detail
gotta
depending on
scale
your
it down
age.
for their age.
Yeah, but when you ask me when you're 5 years old, Dad, how do cars work? I'm not going to say there's a little guy that runs and powers the wheels, right? Like, well, there's a mini power plant in your car that spins wheels by blowing up gas, right? I might
Right.
give like a really simple explanation. But I always felt like if I start telling you bullshit tales about like the tooth fairy and fucking Santa Claus, first of all, okay, I was poor before I got into streaming. I make a lot of money now. I want credit for that, okay? Santa Claus is not fucking getting credit for buying your presents. I am, because I work for that shit. Number one. Number two, if I tell you lies in the long term, I don't know how I'm going to influence the way that you view me. Like, oh,
Right,
like
yeah.
there's a couple of things that I told a bullshit ass story about, and now that you're like 9 or 10 or whatever, I'm going to tell you the truth.
I
Like,
kept adding more lies over the
Yeah,
years
no,
to
fuck
keep you
that, like,
believing this because
yeah.
I thought it was cute. Like my kid is 2, so I don't really have to think about it much.
Mhm.
It's just purely cute that she thinks that Santa is this great guy. But yeah, as soon as she starts asking questions, I don't really want to.
And
Adam is much more
more-
base than you.
No, well, hold on, real quick. I'm bringing this
the-
back to what you said. More fundamentally, I think that Christmas and the human experience and everything surrounding that is so beautiful and so awesome without needing that
Mm.
Santa Claus figure. It's cool that we have a day where we buy presents, we get around the Christmas tree, we drink hot chocolate, we watch the same fucking movies, and we have like all these little rituals. I think that could be so cool and awesome and beautiful without needing the fat
Like,
fucking red
my
loser.
kid is gonna like the mascot at the baseball game, but it's not like I have to convince her that it's a real bird.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's fun to celebrate. Yeah, it's a cool ritual. Go. Yeah, what were you saying?
Well, isn't a lie necessary in order to properly tell the truth?
Nah.
And isn't a lie necessary in order to properly run society? I mean, you can't quite handle the truth in terms of what if you knew everything that, say, the CIA knows, if you knew everything that we've actually done to maintain world order or something, would that make it better? Like uncovering all of that?
I think it would, because I think in society we've seen ourselves running in the opposite direction. Jordan Peterson, before he went fucking insane on fixating on trans people and eating too many Xanax,
Up yours, woke liberals.
yeah.
Remember that?
he had a really good talk on, he called the concept was integrating your shadow. That
Right.
we make this mistake sometimes of we are cringe when we're younger and we're like, I'm not going to be cringe anymore. I'm going to ignore all of that. I'm going to do the total opposite. Fuck all that. When the more mature response is, here are ways that I acted improperly. What are the lessons that I can learn from that? And how can I incorporate that into like a fuller, better life? And we have this huge problem. So like my country, the United States of America, has done a lot of really fucked up shit. We did fucked up shit to Indians. We did fucked up shit to African Americans. And we did fucked up shit in the 50s, 60s, 70s in South America, Cold War stuff. We've done a lot of fucked up shit. I still love my country, but I recognize that we're flawed. We're not perfect. And I think we've made this mistake where we've accepted this idea that you cannot love something with imperfections. It has to be amazing. So with the United States, unfortunately, with a lot of progressives, you can't really love the United States. That's almost like a white supremacist thing to say.
Right.
It's a horrible country. We did slavery. We're still doing slavery, apparently. It's like the worst thing ever. And we run into these issues where health at every size is a really good example. You can't condemn yourself for being fat and still love yourself. So now you have to love all of yourself, even you being fat. That's not true. There are things that can be negative about yourself that you accept. This is a negative, but I still love myself overall. We have a really, really hard time with that latter message. So I do think that we need to get better at experiencing some adversity and uncovering some uncomfortable truths and accepting that nothing in life is ever all good or all bad. There's always going to be a trade-off.
I get that. And I also think that for someone who's overweight, you should tell them the truth and be like,
Yeah.
you got to change your diet and go exercise.
And you don't have to
But-
hate yourself. You can still look okay, whatever, but lose some
But
weight.
why do you love America in a way? Because I mean, isn't it a kind of, it's a story you can tell. It's not like there's a ledger where it's like, oh, we killed the Indians, but civil rights movement here, so that evens out. So yeah, we're right.
I think in a way,
we're
but
at
there
one.
is a ledger, in a way, right? We have
Yeah.
the oldest surviving constitution of any country on the planet. That's really fucking cool. We have a document that was written by dudes that wore fucking powdered wigs that now has sections of it that govern like international or space travel, right? We've done like civil rights and we've integrated more different
Sure.
groups of people in the United States. I think there's a lot of cool things on the ledger of U.S. history. It's really fucking awesome.
I don't doubt that.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to turn off sorry, my phone's ringing. I apologize.
All good.
I don't doubt that, but it's like you have an idealized version of yourself in a way that's a kind of story or narrative. It's a lie on some level. It's poetry, and you have an idealized sense of what America is as as a nation that almost has to be poetic and a kind of lie. And I don't think we could function without that.
I guess I
A
don't know what
problem
you
with
mean.
the left, a problem with like, say, Julian Assange as an ideology, not necessarily the person. It's like, let's just pull open the rock and look at every bug crawling around underneath it. Oh, you think your local sheriff is a nice guy. Well, look at this. Look at these photos I have of him of, extramarital affair, or, punching someone in the face in high school or whatever. It's that ultimate, you just get dragged down by all of that negativity. And the way out of it is really to kind of lie to yourself. I mean, I remember when I was playing football, and I would tell myself when we were running sprints, I would be like, after the next sprint, I'm going to claim I have a cramp and not do it. Well, I never did that, but I would kind of tell myself this little, beautiful lie before we did the next thing, and I could keep going. Any kind of person that you've suffered, like with women, or you've had every live stream you do sucks, or every book, no one cares about your latest book. You kind of need to lie to yourself to get you to a psychological state where you can do it again.
You got to
And-
pretend you're asleep before you can fall asleep.
I guess the
Yeah.
thing that I disagree on is that, like, ontologically, when I think of stories and narratives, what I'm really thinking about is a constellation. Like, constellations don't really exist, but it's a way for us to organize the stars, right? And I feel like the thing that we do sometimes is, like, I might have a constellation of 30 stars, and or I've got 30 stars that are arranged in a circle, and the constellation that I make is a triangle because I only look at 3 of them.
Mhm.
And that might be a story and a constellation I make, but I'm missing so much of the story by ignoring all of the other little data points. That these stars are organized in a perfect circle, and the more data points that I can assume in creating that narrative, the better. So when I think about telling lies or telling truths, what I think about is when people want to tell lies to further a narrative, they're ignoring all of the other stars that could make for a bigger and more complicated constellation in favor of one that doesn't really accurately represent what's being captured underneath. So I think that the lies are hard sometimes because we want to lie about certain things. But then on the flip side of that, I think about when I think of all the conspiracies that exist today, right? Everything is a conspiracy theory when you don't know how anything works, right? If you don't know like how the government, how the FDA works, then of course it seems like Fauci gets paid to approve drugs, even though he's not even part of the FDA, Or Trump is being weeded out by the deep state because of Anderson Cooper, and it's like he's not part of the yeah. So yeah, I guess this is something that okay, let me wrap this up real quick. Okay, sorry. Something that I believed a long time ago was that conservatives were better than liberals at getting messages across to people because conservatives were telling lies and liberals were trying to tell the truth. And that was a lie that I told myself for a long time. I thought it was the truth. But it's like, yeah, like if I want to talk about these issues, it's so complicated. And all conservatives have to say is like, be racist, blah, 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 blah. But upon further self-reflection, I don't think that's true. I think what happened was conservatives got so good at telling stories and wrapping all their facts together. And liberals did this thing where it's like, well, I'm right, so I don't have to try to tell you a story. Like, I'm just right. Like, accept this and that and that. That if we were to go back to trying to tell stories with more stars in the constellation, we could do a better job than somebody that's omitting some facts that's just telling a comfortable lie, I guess.
Right. I mean, I guess the way I would talk about it metaphorically is that, you see the entire universe and you can't make out any picture whatsoever. You have more data, you just have kind of more data. There's no way of sifting it. And any act of sifting, regardless of the quantity, is already an act in which your mind is affecting reality. Like you're projecting your own will onto something, no matter how much data you have. You're projecting a narrative.
Mhm.
So I guess what I would say is I agree that over the past, I mean, one of the reasons why I've been kind of alienated from the dissident right or alt-right 2.0 or whatever the hell it is like the conspiracy theories about vaccines or COVID. I hated it. Fuck them. If you're gonna start promoting that shit, I'm out. But I guess what I would say is, and this is a problem with the right in general, the going into conspiracies. But what I would say is that we need a better lie. Like there's no
Why not just a better story?
okay. Well, but now we're just arguing.
I feel like when you say
semantics.
I agree with you that the philosophical way is we would say normativity precedes epistemology. That by choosing facts we've already intentionally changed. And I agree
Correct.
with you there, but we don't have to lie. That's just like, are you familiar with the difference between like history versus like historiography?
Sure.
Right? Like if you want to tell the history of World War II, nobody truly tells the whole history, what every single soldier did. You pick and choose, like, these are the parts of the story that we're going to tell.
Right.
I don't think that's necessarily a lie. That's just like the narrative,
But you understand why I would present it in this kind
because
of
you're omitting some
fashion.
kind of.
Yeah, it effectively, it's all the news that's fit to print. Like you're
Sure.
already making a choice even before you begin examining these topics.
I guess lying just sounds like you're.
Okay, well, let's use storytelling. But
Okay,
like
sure.
I'll grant you that we need a story.
I agree with
That's
that.
what we're lacking.
Yes.
And that story is going to be something that we assert about how we view a kind of idealized self or idealized nation.
Yeah, as an
And that's
individual or as a
good thing.
country.
We should
Yeah.
embrace that.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Okay, well, they're trying to get us the fuck out of here so we can talk to these leftist chicks that I brought in for you. But I thought that this was quite productive and interesting. I think the fans are going to love it. So,
Good.
yeah, maybe we should do this again sometime.
Yeah, whenever.
Anytime, just name it and I'll be here. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Richard.
Mhm.
Thank you, Destiny. Everybody can, I'm sure, figure, if you made it this deep in, I'm sure you can figure out what the fucking channels of communication are. But yeah, thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. Check us out on YouTube, TikTok, Patreon, Instagram, etc. Like, comment, subscribe, nojumper.com if you want to support.